The gunshot echoed through the crystal chandeliers before anyone could scream. Evelyn Hart, CEO of the nation's most powerful tech empire, watched in frozen horror as the assassin's weapon swung toward her chest. She had exactly 1 second to live. Then, a blur of motion. Her husband, the quiet janitor she'd married 3 months ago for an inheritance scheme, moved like liquid death. His hand caught the gunman's wrist, twisted, and the crack of breaking bone pierced the ballroom. As armed guards collapsed around them, Daniel Park stood over her, eyes cold as winter steel, and Evelyn realized she'd married a ghost with a trigger finger. Before we dive into this explosive story, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. Now, let's begin. The boardroom smelled of expensive leather and barely concealed panic. Evelyn Hart stood at the head of the mahogany table, her reflection sharp in its polished surface, and watched 11 board members struggle to hide their shock. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan stretched beneath them like a kingdom of glass and steel. Her kingdom, technically. Though these men in their $1,000 suits had spent the last 6 months trying to forget that fact. "You're married?" Gerald Sutton finally managed, his jowls quivering with indignation. The chief financial officer had been with Hart Technologies since her father founded it 30 years ago, and he clearly believed that gave him the right to question her personal life. "To whom?" Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. "His name is Daniel Park. We were married 3 days ago in a private ceremony." "This is highly irregular," Margaret Chen interjected, her pen tapping against her legal pad with machine gun precision. The general counsel's expression suggested she was already calculating the liability implications. "Your father's will explicitly states you must be married before your 32nd birthday to maintain controlling interest in the company. That deadline was yesterday," Evelyn finished smoothly, "which is why I'm married. The terms of the inheritance have been satisfied. My lawyers filed the necessary documentation with the probate court this morning." Gerald's face had gone an alarming shade of purple. "You're telling us that you found someone, courted them, and married them in, what, less than a week? Forgive me, Ms. Hart, but that strains credulity." "I don't recall asking for your forgiveness, Gerald." Evelyn's voice dropped 10 degrees. "Or requiring your belief. I'm informing you of a legal fact. Nothing more." "We have a right to know who this man is," Thomas Whitmore cut in. The VP of Operations leaned forward, his politician's smile firmly in place. "After all, as your husband, he'll have certain access to you, to company information. Surely you understand our concern." Evelyn had anticipated this. She'd prepared for every question, every angle of attack. What she hadn't prepared for was the knot of something uncomfortable that twisted in her stomach when Thomas said the word husband. Because Daniel Park wasn't really her husband. Not in any way that mattered. "Mr. Park has signed an extensive prenuptial agreement," she said crisply. "He has no stake in Hart Technologies, no access to proprietary information, and no interest in my business affairs. This is a personal matter that satisfies a legal requirement. That's all." "Then why marry him at all?" Gerald demanded. "Why not find someone more suitable? Someone from our social circle, someone with connections. Someone you could control?" Evelyn's eyebrow arched. "How transparent of you, Gerald." The CFO sputtered, but before he could formulate a response, the boardroom door opened. Every head turned. Daniel Park pushed a cleaning cart into the room, his eyes down, his posture apologetic. He wore the standard maintenance uniform, gray shirt, darker gray pants, both slightly too large for his frame. A baseball cap shadowed his face. He moved with the careful invisibility of someone who had learned to go unnoticed in spaces where he didn't belong. "Sorry," he murmured, already backing toward the door. "Thought the room was empty. I'll come back." "Mr. Park," Evelyn's voice stopped him mid-retreat. "Actually, your timing is perfect. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my husband." The silence that followed could have shattered diamond. Daniel's head came up slowly, and for just a fraction of a second, Evelyn saw something flicker in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. Then it was gone, replaced by a carefully neutral expression that gave away nothing at all. "Ma'am," he said quietly. You sure about this? Quite sure. Margaret Chen's mouth had fallen open. Thomas Whitmore looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Gerald Sutton made a sound somewhere between a cough and a dying walrus. This is a joke, Gerald finally managed. This has to be a joke. You married the help? I married a man who asked for nothing, expected nothing, and signed papers that guarantee him nothing, Evelyn replied, her voice cutting through the rising chaos, which makes him considerably more trustworthy than anyone in this room. Daniel remained motionless by the door, his hands loose at his sides. To anyone watching, he looked uncomfortable, out of place, a working-class man caught in a world he didn't understand. But Evelyn had learned to read the subtle tells in the 3 weeks since their first conversation, the way his weight distributed on the balls of his feet, the slight angle of his shoulders that kept both the door and the windows in his peripheral vision, the calculated stillness that could explode into motion without warning. He wasn't uncomfortable. He was ready. For what? She still wasn't entirely sure. This is unacceptable, Thomas said, finding his voice. Evelyn, I understand you were in a difficult position with the inheritance deadline, but this farce undermines everything your father built. The optics alone will show that I value integrity over appearances. My father understood that, even if you don't. Evelyn gathered her papers, signaling the meeting's end. This discussion is over, gentlemen. Ms. Chen, my personal life is not company business. The inheritance terms have been satisfied. That's all you need to know. She walked toward the door and Daniel stepped aside to let her pass. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the performance they'd just delivered, perhaps, or simply two co-conspirators recognizing each other across a divide of secrets. Ma'am, he said again, softer this time. Mr. Park. She nodded once, crisp and professional, then swept from the room. Behind her, the board erupted into arguments and accusations. She ignored them all. They would fall in line eventually. They had no choice. Her father had been many things, most of them complicated, but his will had been airtight. Marry before 32 or lose everything to a foundation that would dismember the company piece by piece. She'd satisfied the terms. That was all that mattered. Even if satisfying them had required proposing marriage to a janitor she'd met exactly twice before their courthouse wedding. 3 weeks earlier, the executive floor was always empty after midnight. Evelyn preferred it that way. No assistants hovering, no board members dropping by with quick questions that ate up hours. Just her, the city lights, and the endless scroll of financial projections that determined whether Hart Technologies survived its next quarter. Her father had built an empire on military contracts and cutting-edge defense systems. Then he died 6 months ago, suddenly and without warning, leaving her with a company she'd spent her whole life preparing to lead and a will that seemed designed to destroy her. Marry before your 32nd birthday, or lose controlling interest. It was medieval, insulting, exactly like something her father would do. She didn't hear the cleaning cart until it was almost beside her desk. Looking up sharply, she found herself facing a man in maintenance gray, his eyes cast down in automatic apology. Sorry, Ms. Hart. Didn't realize you were still here. Clearly. She glanced at the clock, 12:47 a.m. You work late? Night shift. He was already turning away. I can come back at... No, it's fine. Just empty the bins. I'm not here. It was dismissive, the kind of thing she'd said 1,000 times to 100 different people who kept the building running while she fought battles in boardrooms and merger negotiations. She returned to her screens, already forgetting he existed. But something made her look up again a few minutes later. He was still there, methodically wiping down the conference table at the far end of her office. His movements were efficient, practiced, almost military in their precision. And he was watching the financial news on the screen mounted to her wall, not obviously, not obtrusively, but watching nonetheless. You follow the markets? She asked, more from curiosity than any real interest. He glanced at her, surprised she was still talking to him. Sometimes. What do you think of Hart Technologies' Q3 projections? Now he did look surprised. People didn't ask janitors about quarterly earnings reports. But after a long moment, he said, I think you're overextended in Southeast Asia. Currency fluctuations are going to hit harder than your analysts expect. Evelyn's fingers stopped moving on her keyboard. Excuse me? The bot. It's unstable. Your Bangkok facility is vulnerable. He said it like he was commenting on the weather, then went back to cleaning. She stared at him. The Southeast Asian expansion was classified, or as classified as corporate strategy could be. The projections weren't public. The Bangkok facility was barely more than blueprints and NDAs. How do you know about Bangkok? I read. He shrugged. And people leave papers lying around. You'd be surprised what maintenance sees. It was a reasonable explanation. It was also exactly what someone with training in intelligence gathering would say. Evelyn closed her laptop slowly. What's your name? Daniel Park. How long have you worked here, Daniel Park? 8 months. Give or take? 8 months. Right around the time her father's health started declining, right when things at Heart Technologies began to feel off. Nothing she could point to directly, just a sense that pieces were moving on boards she couldn't see, that currents were shifting beneath the surface of her carefully controlled world. You seem overqualified for maintenance work, she observed. It pays the bills. His tone discouraged further questions, but Evelyn hadn't built her career by accepting discouragement. What did you do before this? Different things. Nothing interesting. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. They studied each other across the expanse of her office. He was maybe 35, lean in a way that suggested endurance rather than gym workouts. Asian features, Korean probably, given his name. Dark eyes that gave away nothing except a deep well of control. And underneath the baggy uniform, a stillness that reminded her uncomfortably of soldiers she'd seen at military demonstrations. The kind of men who could switch from perfectly calm to perfectly lethal without any apparent transition. I have a problem, she said abruptly. Most people do. I need to get married in 3 weeks, and I don't have time to find someone I can trust not to destroy my life in the process. Daniel Park went very still. The cloth in his hand stopped moving. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. That's an unusual problem. I have an unusual life. My father's will requires marriage before I turn 32, which happens in exactly 22 days. If I'm not married by then, I lose controlling interest in this company to a board of vultures who will tear it apart for spare parts. Evelyn heard herself talking and couldn't quite believe the words coming out of her mouth. She didn't confide in people. She certainly didn't confide in maintenance workers. I need someone who will sign a contract, go through a ceremony, and then disappear back into their own life while I run my company. No strings, no complications, and absolutely no interest in my money or my business. Sounds like you need a lawyer, not a janitor. Lawyers are expensive. They keep records. They have ambitions. She leaned back in her chair, watching him. You're invisible. You've worked here 8 months, and I've seen you maybe twice. You know things you shouldn't, which means you're either very smart or very dangerous, and I'm betting on both. And when I asked about your past, you deflected like someone with training in counter-interrogation. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a microscopic tightening that told her she'd hit closer to truth than he wanted to admit. What makes you think I'd say yes? He asked quietly. Because you're working night shift maintenance when you're capable of much more. That means you're hiding from something or someone. And you have a daughter. Now she had his full attention. How do you know about Maya? I don't, not really. But you keep a photo taped inside your cleaning cart. I saw it when you leaned over to plug in the vacuum. Little girl, maybe 6 years old. You're protective enough to keep her picture close but not on display, which suggests you don't want people connecting her to you. That level of caution, combined with everything else, tells me you're a man with secrets, and secrets make you controllable. Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then, very slowly, he set down his cleaning supplies and walked closer to her desk. His movements were careful, deliberate, nothing threatening, but nothing submissive either. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. Exactly what I said. Courthouse wedding. Prenuptial agreement that gives you nothing. We live separately, see each other at carefully staged public events, and after a reasonable interval, say 2 years, we divorce quietly. You walk away with a settlement large enough to disappear permanently if that's what you want. Your daughter gets a trust fund for college. And I keep my company. Why me? Because everyone else I could ask would want something I'm not willing to give. Power, position, access. You just want to be left alone. That makes you perfect. He studied her for a long time, his face unreadable. Finally, he said, "You're either very desperate or very stupid." Desperate, Evelyn agreed, but not stupid. Do we have a deal? Daniel glanced at the photo of his daughter, invisible from where Evelyn sat, but clearly occupying his thoughts. When he looked back, something in his eyes had changed. Not softened exactly, but shifted into a different configuration of wariness and calculation. "One condition," he said. "Maya never knows the real reason we got married. As far as she's concerned, this is real." Agreed. "And if anything threatens her, anything at all, the deal's off. I don't care about your company or your inheritance. She comes first." "I wouldn't expect anything less." Evelyn extended her hand across the desk. "Do we have a deal, Mr. Park?" He looked at her hand for a moment, then took it. His grip was firm, controlled, and carried faint calluses that had nothing to do with pushing brooms and emptying trash bins. "We have a deal, Ms. Hart." Neither of them smiled. There was nothing happy about the arrangement they'd just made. Just two people trapped by circumstances, making the best of impossible choices. Evelyn had no way of knowing, in that moment, that she'd just shaken hands with one of the most dangerous men in the world. A ghost who'd spent 15 years hunting enemies in places that didn't exist, executing missions that would never be acknowledged, and building a body count that would have kept her awake at night if she'd known the numbers. All she knew was that she'd found someone to marry who wanted nothing from her except to be left alone. It seemed, at the time, like the perfect solution. Present day, 3 months after the wedding. The penthouse apartment felt like a museum after dark, beautiful, expensive, and utterly lifeless. Evelyn kicked off her heels in the entryway and padded barefoot across marble floors toward the kitchen. It was nearly 11 p.m. She'd been at the office since 6 a.m., wrestling with a contract dispute that threatened to derail their largest government project. Her head throbbed, her feet ached, and somewhere in the building's other wing, her husband was probably putting his daughter to bed. They'd settled into a routine over the past 3 months, she and Daniel. He lived in the guest wing with Maya, 3 rooms that might as well have been on another continent for all the interaction they implied. Evelyn kept to the master suite in her home office. They crossed paths maybe twice a week, usually in the kitchen, occasionally in the elevator. Always polite, always distant, exactly as they'd agreed. She was pouring wine when she heard the soft footsteps behind her. "Maya's asleep," Daniel said quietly. He'd changed out of his work clothes into a dark jeans and a plain t-shirt that somehow emphasized the lean muscle beneath. "She wanted to know if you'd read to her tomorrow night." Evelyn paused mid-pour. "Me? She likes you, thinks you're like a fairy tale princess who runs a castle." The ghost of amusement touched his face. "I tried to explain corporate hierarchies, but she's 6. Everything's magic at 6. I don't know any children's stories. She'll provide the book. You just have to do the voices." It should have been easy to say no. Their arrangement didn't include bonding with his daughter, but something about the way he asked, casual, like it didn't matter, though they both knew it did, made her hesitate. "What time?" she found herself asking. 7:30. "After dinner?" "I'll try to be home by then." Daniel nodded once, then turned to go. But something made Evelyn speak again. "The board meeting today. They're still upset about our marriage." He stopped. "Does that surprise you?" "No, but they're digging into your background. Gerald hired a private investigator." Now he turned fully, and for just a moment, something sharp and cold flashed in his eyes before the careful neutrality returned. "Did he find anything interesting?" "Nothing, which is interesting in itself." Evelyn set down her wine glass. "Most people leave trails, Daniel. Employment records, social media, credit histories. You barely exist on paper before you started working at Hart Technologies. It's like you appeared out of nowhere 8 months ago." Some people prefer privacy. Some people are hiding something. They studied each other across the kitchen's granite expanse. The city glittered behind floor-to-ceiling windows, a million lights, a million stories, none of them true. "Are you asking me a question?" Daniel said finally. "I'm trying to decide if I should be worried." About what? About who you really are. About what happens when Gerald's investigator keeps digging and eventually finds something I should have found before I married you. Daniel moved closer, and despite everything, despite the agreement, the distance, the careful walls they'd built, Evelyn felt her pulse quicken slightly. He stopped on the other side of the kitchen island, close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the exact shade of dark brown in his eyes. You want the truth? He asked quietly. That would be refreshing. The truth is, there are things in my past I'm not proud of. Things I did for reasons that seemed right at the time. I'm not a threat to you or your company, but I'm also not the simple single father you thought you were hiring for this arrangement. He paused. If that's a problem, we can end this now. I'll walk away. The prenup holds. No complications. Evelyn's fingers traced the rim of her wine glass. Why did you say yes? That night in my office, when I made this insane proposal, why did you agree? Because I needed to disappear, and being married to a CEO with trust issues seemed like effective cover. His honesty was almost brutal, and because you offered my daughter a future I couldn't give her on a janitor's salary. But you're not really a janitor. No, he admitted. I'm not. Then what are you? The silence stretched between them, heavy with questions neither was quite ready to answer. Finally, Daniel said, someone trying to build a different life. That's all you need to know. It wasn't all she needed to know. It wasn't even close. But something in his voice, a kind of weary honesty beneath the evasion, made her nod slowly. Okay, she said. For now, that's enough. Relief flickered across his face, quickly hidden. He nodded once and turned to leave. But at the kitchen door, he paused. Evelyn? The thing with Maya tomorrow night. Thank you. Then he was gone, disappearing back into the apartment's other wing like a ghost fading into shadow. Evelyn stood alone in her perfect kitchen, in her perfect penthouse, in her carefully controlled life, and wondered, not for the first time since their courthouse wedding, exactly what kind of arrangement she'd actually made. Outside, Manhattan glittered and burned, and somewhere in the building's security feeds that she didn't know existed, cameras recorded her every movement while encrypted messages bounced between servers in locations that didn't appear on any map. The game was already in motion. The players were already moving, and neither Evelyn nor Daniel had any idea how many pieces were actually on the board or who was really controlling them. But they would learn, soon. Whether they survived the lesson was still an open question. The next evening, Hart Technologies' executive floor. Thomas Whitmore's office smelled like cigar smoke and ambition. Gerald Sutton stood by the window, watching the city below with the expression of a man plotting something he shouldn't. The investigator's report came back, Gerald said without preamble. Thomas looked up from his desk. And? Nothing. Park's history goes back exactly 8 months and 17 days, the day he was hired as maintenance staff. Before that, a few scattered employment records, all low-level positions, none lasting more than 6 months. No military service, no criminal record, no social media presence. It's suspicious, Thomas finished. Professionally suspicious. Like someone went through and scrubbed their past with considerable expertise. Gerald turned from the window, his expression calculating. I have a contact, former CIA. He owes me a favor. I'm thinking, don't. Thomas's voice cut through the room like a blade. Not yet. Gerald frowned. You said you wanted leverage against Evelyn. This marriage is clearly her weak point. If we can prove fraud, prove she arranged it just to satisfy the inheritance terms. I don't care about the marriage. Thomas leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. I care about timing. Right now, we look like bitter board members upset about being outmaneuvered. Any move we make against her personally backfires. But if we're patient, the Sao Paulo deal, Gerald said slowly, understanding dawning, you think she'll screw it up. I think she's stretched thin trying to prove herself. Her father's death left gaps. Operational, strategic, relational. She's brilliant. I won't deny that, but she doesn't have Raymond's instincts, doesn't have his flexibility when it comes to the gray areas. Raymond was corrupt, Gerald said bluntly. He had half the Pentagon on his payroll. He moved arms to countries under embargo. built this company into a defense industry titan, Thomas interrupted smoothly. His methods were questionable, his results were not. And now his daughter, with her Stanford MBA and her idealistic notions of corporate ethics, is trying to run Hart Technologies like a legitimate business. It's almost charming. Gerald's frown deepened. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we let Evelyn be Evelyn. Let her chase transparency and accountability. Let her audit every contract and question every relationship her father built. And when the company starts bleeding money because she can't navigate the realities of our industry, when the board gets nervous and the shareholders start making noise. Thomas smiled coldly. That's when we make our move, not before. And Park? Is irrelevant, a distraction. Though, Thomas pulled out his phone, scrolling through something Gerald couldn't see. I want to know more about the daughter. Maya, isn't it? 6 years old. Mother's not in the picture. Our investigator couldn't find any records of marriage or divorce. Could be Park's not even the biological father. Could be a lot of things, Thomas agreed. But children are vulnerable, useful, if one needs leverage at the right moment. Gerald shifted uncomfortably. Thomas, I'm willing to play hardball to protect our interests, but threatening a kid? I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply gathering information. Knowledge is never wasted, Gerald. Thomas stood, smoothing his suit jacket. Now, I have a dinner with Senator Morrison. Keep digging into Park's background, but quietly. And keep an eye on Evelyn. I want to know every move she makes, every contract she signs, every relationship she builds or destroys. You want her to fail. I want her to be exactly what she is, a brilliant woman in over her head, trying to redeem her father's legacy without understanding that some legacies can't be redeemed. They can only be managed. As Thomas picked up his briefcase. Raymond understood that. Evelyn will learn it eventually. The question is how much damage she does before the lesson sinks in. After Thomas left, Gerald remained at the window, staring down at the city's endless lights. He'd worked with Raymond Hart for 30 years. He'd helped build this company from a small defense contractor into a multi-billion-dollar empire. He'd witnessed things, deals, transactions, relationships that existed in the shadows of official records. And now Raymond's daughter was shining lights into those shadows, asking questions no one wanted to answer. Something was coming. Gerald could feel it the way old soldiers felt incoming weather. A storm building on a horizon most people couldn't see yet. The question was whether any of them, Thomas, Evelyn, the mysterious Daniel Park, would survive when it finally broke. But that same night, the penthouse. Maya Park had selected the most elaborate fairy tale book Evelyn had ever seen. Full-color illustrations, pop-up castles, a soundtrack feature that played dramatic music at key moments. The 6-year-old sat cross-legged on her bed, wearing pajamas covered in stars, her dark eyes bright with anticipation. "Daddy said you run a castle," Maya announced as Evelyn settled awkwardly into the chair beside the bed. "Is that true?" "Sort of. Though it's more like a very tall building with computers instead of dragons." "That's disappointing. Dragons are better." Despite herself, Evelyn smiled. "I can't argue with that logic." They'd been reading for about 20 minutes, Evelyn doing her best with the voices, Maya providing enthusiastic editorial comments, when Daniel appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching them with an expression Evelyn couldn't quite decipher. "5 more minutes, Maya," he said gently. "Then sleep." "But the princess hasn't defeated the evil wizard yet." "She'll defeat him tomorrow. The wizard isn't going anywhere." Maya sighed dramatically but nodded. Evelyn finished the chapter, closed the book, and stood. Maya immediately grabbed her hand. "You'll come back tomorrow?" the little girl asked. Evelyn glanced at Daniel, who gave the smallest shrug. "Your call." "Yes. Tomorrow." "Promise?" "I promise." Maya beamed, released her hand, and burrowed under her covers. Daniel moved into the room to tuck her in properly, his movements gentle and practiced. Evelyn found herself watching the transformation, the careful, controlled man she'd married shifting into someone softer, more human. A father putting his daughter to bed. "Love you, Bug," he murmured, kissing Maya's forehead. "Love you, Daddy. Love you, Evelyn." Evelyn froze. The words were automatic, sleepy, innocent, but they hit like a physical blow. She managed some kind of response, then fled into the hallway before the sudden tightness in her chest could manifest as anything visible. Daniel joined her a moment later, pulling Maya's door partially closed. "She gets attached quickly," he said quietly. "If it's too much, it's fine." Evelyn's voice came out sharper than intended. "I made a commitment. I'll keep it." They walked back toward the main part of the apartment in silence. At the junction where his wing split from hers, Daniel stopped. "Thank you," he said, "for tonight, for—" he gestured vaguely, "for being kind to her. She's a good kid. You've done well with her." "I've done my best. It's not always enough." Something in his tone made Evelyn turn back to study him more carefully. In the hallway's dim lighting, he looked tired, not physically, but somewhere deeper, like a man carrying weight no one else could see. "Why did you become a janitor?" she asked suddenly. "With whatever skills you have, whatever training, why take a minimum wage job cleaning offices?" "Because no one looks at janitors," Daniel said simply. "We're invisible. We go anywhere, see everything, and no one thinks we matter enough to be threats." "Threats to what?" He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "That's the question, isn't it?" Before Evelyn could push further, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. "I have to take this." Daniel nodded and disappeared into his wing. Evelyn answered the call. "Ms. Hart?" Her head of security, Michael Chen, sounded tense. "We have a situation. Someone accessed your father's private files from an internal terminal 2 hours ago. Encrypted files we didn't even know existed. The access codes were current, but my father's been dead for 6 months," Evelyn finished, "which means someone either copied his codes or has been sitting on them, waiting for the right moment to use them." "Yes, ma'am. We're trying to trace the terminal location now, but whoever did this knew what they were doing. They bounced the access through 6 different servers before—" "I'll be there in 20 minutes." Evelyn was already moving toward her bedroom, toward her closet, toward the armor of business suits and executive authority. "Lock down the system. No one in or out of those files until I arrive. And Michael? Don't trust anyone in IT. This came from inside." She hung up and stood for a moment in her pristine bedroom, staring at her reflection in the darkened windows. Somewhere in her company, her father's company, someone was stealing secrets that could destroy everything she'd built. And she had no idea who or why or what those secrets might contain. Behind her reflection, in the glass, she could see the faint outline of the corridor leading to Daniel's wing, could see the light still visible under his door. "Someone trying to build a different life," he'd said. "That's all you need to know." But what if she needed to know more? What if the mysterious husband she'd married for convenience was somehow connected to whatever rot her father had left behind? Evelyn shook off the thought. Paranoia wouldn't help. Evidence would. She changed clothes, grabbed her car keys, and headed for the elevator. She never saw Daniel emerge from his room 5 minutes after she left. Never saw him pull out a phone that wasn't connected to any normal network. Never heard the brief, encrypted conversation he had with someone whose name she wouldn't have recognized. The game was accelerating. The pieces were moving faster now, and the board was much larger than either of them had realized. In 48 hours, everything would change. The careful distance they'd maintained would shatter. Secrets would spill into the light. And both Daniel and Evelyn would discover that the arrangement they'd made, the marriage of convenience, the contract built on mutual need and shared evasion, was never what they thought it was. Some forces had been set in motion before they ever met. Some traps had been laid before they knew they were players in the game, and some truths, once revealed, couldn't be hidden again. The Hart Technologies server room hummed with the white noise of 1,000 machines processing 1 billion calculations per second. Evelyn stood in the center of it all, watching Michael Chen's team trace digital footprints that shouldn't exist. "Here." Michael pointed to a cascade of code on his screen. The access originated from Terminal 47B. That's in the sub-basement maintenance area. Maintenance? Evelyn felt something cold slide down her spine. "Show me the security footage." The video quality was grainy but clear enough. At 9:47 p.m., a figure in gray maintenance coveralls entered the restricted area, used a keycard that registered as belonging to a supervisor who'd been dead for 3 months, and sat at the terminal for exactly 18 minutes. The camera angle never caught the person's face, almost as if they knew precisely where the blind spots were. "Can we enhance the image?" Evelyn asked. "Already tried. Whoever this is, they're good. Never looked up, kept their face shadowed." Michael paused the footage on a frame that showed the intruder's hands on the keyboard. "But look here, the typing pattern. That's not Hunt and Peck. That's someone with serious technical training." "What files did they access?" Michael's expression darkened. "Your father's personal archives, specifically a directory labeled Ghost Protocol. We didn't even know it existed until the access triggered our new security algorithms. The encryption is military grade. We can't open it without codes that died with your father." "Or didn't die with him." Evelyn stared at the frozen image of those hands, steady, efficient, dangerous. "If someone has his codes, they've had them for months. Why use them now? Why risk exposure?" "Because something in those files is worth the risk," came a voice from behind them. Evelyn spun around. Daniel stood in the doorway of the server room, still wearing the jeans and t-shirt from earlier, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Park," Michael said stiffly. The head of security clearly didn't appreciate unauthorized personnel in restricted areas, husband or not. "This is a secure facility." "I came with Evelyn. She left in a hurry. I wanted to make sure everything was okay." Daniel's eyes moved from the screens to Evelyn to Michael, cataloging details with an efficiency that made her newly suspicious. "What's Ghost Protocol?" "None of your concern," Michael said flatly. "Michael." Evelyn held up a hand. "It's fine. Daniel, Ghost Protocol appears to be some kind of classified project my father was running. We don't know what it contains." "But someone does." Daniel moved closer to the screens, his gaze sharp. "And they needed access badly enough to risk getting caught. That suggests urgency. Either something's about to happen, or they're running out of time to stop something that's already in motion." Michael and Evelyn exchanged glances. The analysis was too quick, too tactical, too much like someone with intelligence training would think. "How do you know that?" Evelyn asked carefully. Daniel seemed to realize he'd said too much. "Basic logic. People don't take risks unless the reward justifies them." "What was your father working on before he died?" "Dozens of projects. Hundreds, if you count everything across all divisions." Evelyn moved to another screen, pulling up her father's calendar from his final months. But his personal attention was focused on 3 major contracts: the Sao Paulo defense system, the updated drone guidance technology for the Air Force, and something called Project Sentinel that he never fully briefed me on before he died. "Project Sentinel," Daniel repeated softly. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or concern. "What do you know about it?" "Almost nothing. It was compartmentalized even within the company. Only a handful of people had access, and most of them have either retired or resigned since my father's death." She looked at him directly. "Why? Does that name mean something to you?" For a long moment, Daniel didn't answer. Then he said, "I need to make a call." "Excuse me." He walked out before Evelyn could stop him, leaving her and Michael alone in the electronic hum of the server room. "I don't trust him," Michael said bluntly. "There's something wrong about this whole situation. Your sudden marriage, his convenient background, and now he shows up here asking questions about classified projects." "I know." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "But until I have proof he's involved in this, he's still my husband, legally, if not actually, which means we proceed carefully." "With respect, Ms. Hart, careful might not be enough. If your father was involved in something illegal, my father built this company from nothing. Whatever he did, whatever choices he made, they kept thousands of people employed and this country defended." Even as she said it, Evelyn wondered if she believed it anymore. "We need to find out what's in Ghost Protocol. Can you bypass the encryption?" Michael shook his head. "Not without triggering a data wipe. Whoever designed this security knew what they were doing. It's a digital fortress." "Then we find another way in." Evelyn pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts until she found the name she needed. "I know someone who might be able to help. He worked with my father on some of the early encryption systems. If anyone can crack this, it's him." She made the call, spoke briefly in technical shorthand, and hung up. "He'll be here in an hour. In the meantime, I want every person who had access to that maintenance terminal identified and background checked. Someone either planned this carefully or got very lucky. I don't believe in luck. Yes, ma'am. Michael hesitated. And Mr. Park? Evelyn thought about the way Daniel had analyzed the situation, the precision of his questions, the flicker of recognition when she mentioned Project Sentinel. Put surveillance on him, she said quietly. I need to know who he's calling and what he's doing. If my husband is somehow involved in this, I need to know before it destroys everything. Michael nodded and moved to implement her orders. Evelyn remained in the server room, surrounded by machines that held secrets she couldn't access, married to a man she was starting to realize she didn't know at all. Outside in the parking garage, Daniel stood in the shadow between security lights and pressed a phone to his ear. The number he dialed wasn't in any normal directory. The conversation that followed wasn't recorded by any system Hart Technologies owned. It's Ghost, he said softly when the line connected. We have a problem. The voice on the other end was female, clipped, military precise. Define problem. Someone accessed the protocol files. They're digging into Sentinel. A pause. Then, are you compromised? Not yet. But she's smart. She's going to start asking questions I can't answer without blowing my cover. Then don't answer them. Your mission parameters haven't changed. Protect the asset, monitor the situation, and report any developments that might expose the operation. The asset, Daniel repeated, his voice flat. You mean my wife? I mean the woman who inherited control of one of the most dangerous private military contractors in the world. The woman whose father sold weapons to enemies of the United States and called it business. The woman who might be continuing his work, knowingly or not. The voice softened slightly. I know this is complicated, Daniel. I know you've been in deep cover for 8 months and the lines are starting to blur. But we need you in position. If Hart Technologies is still running Ghost Protocol after Raymond's death, we need to know. And if Evelyn doesn't know anything, if she's just the daughter trying to clean up her father's mess, then we protect her from the consequences of his choices. But we confirm that first. No assumptions, no emotional compromises. A beat. Can you maintain your cover? Daniel thought about Maya asking when Evelyn would read to her again. Thought about the way Evelyn had looked at him tonight, suspicion and something else warring in her eyes. Thought about the marriage that was supposed to be simple convenience turning into something far more complicated. Yes, he said finally. I can maintain it. Good. We're sending additional support. Call sign Phoenix will be in position by morning. She'll make contact through the usual channels. And Daniel, be careful. If Ghost Protocol is active, anyone connected to it is in danger, including you. The line went dead. Daniel stood alone in the parking garage, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Above him, security cameras tracked his position. He could feel them like an itch between his shoulder blades. Evelyn would review this footage. She'd see him making an unauthorized call. She'd have more questions. The careful distance they'd maintained was collapsing faster than he'd anticipated. And when it finally fell apart completely, when she discovered who he really was and why he'd agreed to marry her so readily, the explosion would be spectacular. He just hoped they both survived it. Back in the server room, Evelyn's encryption specialist arrived. A nervous man in his 50s named Dr. Robert Marsh, who'd worked with her father since the company's early days. He studied the Ghost Protocol directory with increasing concern. This is Raymond's work, he said after 20 minutes of analysis. I recognize the architecture, but it's been modified. See these authentication layers? Someone added them after the initial encryption was set up. Within the last 6 months, I'd guess. After my father was already sick, Evelyn said slowly, when he knew he was dying. Or when someone else knew he was dying and wanted to make sure certain information stayed hidden. Marsh adjusted his glasses nervously. Ms. Hart, I can break this encryption, but it's going to take time. Days, maybe a week. And whoever put in these extra security measures will know when I do it. There's a monitoring protocol embedded in the code. The moment someone successfully accesses these files, an alert gets sent. Sent where? I don't know. The destination is encrypted separately. Could be an email address, could be a server, could be a phone number. He looked at her seriously. Are you sure you want to open this Pandora's box? Some secrets your father might have wanted to stay buried. Evelyn thought about the intruder accessing these files, thought about Daniel's too convenient knowledge, thought about 3 months of marriage to a man who was increasingly clearly not who he claimed to be. Break it, she said. I don't care how long it takes or who gets notified. I need to know what my father was hiding. Marsh nodded reluctantly and set to work. Evelyn left Michael to supervise and returned to the executive floor, her mind racing through possibilities and implications. It was nearly 3 a.m. The building was silent except for the skeleton night crew. Her footsteps echoed on marble floors as she walked toward her office. She almost missed the figure standing in the shadows near her door. Jesus! She stumbled backward, her hand instinctively reaching for the phone in her pocket. Sorry. Daniel stepped into the light, hands raised in apology. Didn't mean to scare you. What are you doing here? I thought you went home. Couldn't. Not while you were dealing with this alone. He lowered his hands slowly. Maya's with a neighbor, Mrs. Chen on the 4th floor. She watches her sometimes when I have to work late. Evelyn's heart was still racing from the surprise. You followed me from the server room. I waited in the lobby, figured you'd come back up here eventually. Daniel leaned against the wall, his posture casual but his eyes alert. We need to talk, really talk, not the careful dancing we've been doing for 3 months. About what? About how you conveniently know things you shouldn't? About how you ask questions like someone with intelligence training? About how you appeared in my life exactly when I needed someone to marry, and now someone's stealing my father's secrets? Yes, Daniel said simply. About all of that. Evelyn stared at him for a long moment, then unlocked her office door. Inside. I don't want this conversation in the hallway. Her office was dark, except for the city lights filtering through the windows. She didn't turn on the overheads. The semi-darkness felt safer somehow, like secrets could be shared more easily when faces were half hidden in shadow. Start talking, she said, moving to the windows. And this time, tell me the truth. Daniel remained by the door, his back to it. She noticed he'd positioned himself where he could see both her and the corridor outside. The truth is complicated. So uncomplicate it. I can't, not completely. There are things I'm not authorized to tell you, oaths I took that I can't break even for this, he paused. But I can tell you that I'm not your enemy. I never have been. That's not the ringing endorsement you think it is. Evelyn turned to face him. Who do you work for, Daniel? And don't say Heart Technologies Maintenance. We both know that's a cover for something else. I worked for people who protect this country from threats it doesn't know exist. Past tense. I'm retired. You're 35. People don't retire at 35 unless something forced them out. Something did. I wanted a normal life, wanted to raise my daughter somewhere safe without looking over my shoulder every day. His voice was quiet, honest in a way she hadn't heard before. And then your father died, and things I thought were finished turned out to be very much alive. And I realized that getting out isn't as simple as just walking away. My father. Evelyn moved closer, trying to read his expression in the dim light. What did my father have to do with your past? Daniel was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, Project Sentinel. I know what it is, or what it was supposed to be. The bottom dropped out of Evelyn's stomach. How? Because I helped design it 5 years ago, when your father was working with a classified DoD initiative to develop next-generation autonomous defense systems. It was supposed to be an AI-guided network that could identify and neutralize threats faster than any human operator. But it required massive amounts of data, surveillance data, biometric data, communication intercepts, the kind of information that crosses legal lines and raises constitutional questions. My father was building domestic surveillance systems? Evelyn felt sick. Not exactly. The technology was meant for foreign deployment, protecting embassies, military bases, high-value targets in hostile territories. But the architecture could be adapted, the AI could learn, and in the wrong hands, or with the wrong parameters. Daniel moved closer. Your father understood the ethical implications. He built in safeguards, kill switches, oversight protocols. But he also built in backdoors, just in case someone needed to access the system for legitimate reasons. I was part of the team that designed those back doors. And now someone's trying to access them. Yes. Who? That's what I don't know. When I left the project, Sentinel was being shelved. Too controversial, too expensive, too many moving parts that could go wrong. Your father was supposed to have shut it down completely. If it's still active, if someone's using those access codes to get into Ghost Protocol, it means either your father lied about terminating the project or someone rebuilt it without authorization. Evelyn sat down heavily in her desk chair. Why didn't you tell me this before? Why marry me, move into my home, spend 3 months pretending to be someone you're not? Because when I first approached you that night, I didn't know you. I didn't know if you were part of your father's operations or an innocent bystander. And my orders were to get close, to observe, to report back. Daniel's voice was rough with something that might have been regret. But then I got to know you. Saw how hard you're working to build something legitimate out of your father's legacy. Watched you fight with the board, refuse compromises, try to do the right thing even when it costs you. He paused. You're not your father, Evelyn, but you're caught in the web he built, and I don't know how to get you out without destroying everything you've worked for. So what do we do now? Now we figure out who accessed those files and what they're planning to do with the information. Because if Sentinel is operational and someone's trying to control it, we're not just talking about corporate espionage. We're talking about a weapons system that could be turned against targets domestic or foreign, with your company's fingerprints all over it. Evelyn felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders. The inheritance she'd never asked for, the sins of a father she'd loved but maybe never really knew. I have someone breaking the encryption on Ghost Protocol. He says it'll take a few days. Tell him to stop. What? Why? Because the moment those files open, whoever's monitoring them will know. And if they're desperate enough to break into your secure server, they're desperate enough to take more direct action. Daniel's expression was grim. We need to find them first, figure out what they want before they realize we're hunting them. And how do we do that? We set a trap. We leak information about your encryption specialist making progress. We make them nervous. And when they make their move, we're ready. Evelyn studied her husband, her fake husband, her convenient husband, her husband who was apparently a former special operations something with connections to classified military projects. This isn't what I signed up for when I proposed marriage. I know. And if you want to end the arrangement now, I'll understand. I can disappear tonight. Take Maya and go somewhere you'll never find us. The prenup holds, the lawyers handle the divorce, and you never have to see me again. It would be easier, cleaner. One less complication in a situation that was already spiraling out of control. But Evelyn thought about Maya's sleepy voice saying, "Love you, Evelyn," like it was the most natural thing in the world. Thought about Daniel tucking his daughter in with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. Thought about 3 months of careful distance that had somehow, without her quite noticing, started to feel less like an arrangement and more like something else. "No," she said finally. "You don't get to walk away from this. If someone's using my father's work for something dangerous, I need to know. And apparently you're the only person who can help me figure it out. So we do this together. We set your trap. We find whoever's behind this. And then," she took a breath, "then we figure out what the hell we're actually doing with this marriage." Daniel's expression shifted, surprise, relief, and something warmer that he covered quickly. "Okay, together. But no more lies, no more half-truths. If I'm going to trust you with this, I need to know I can actually trust you. I can't tell you everything. Some things are still classified. Some things," he hesitated, "some things I'm not proud of. Actions I took, people I hurt, choices that seem necessary at the time but keep me awake at night now. But I promise you this. I won't lie to you about anything that affects your safety or your company, no matter what happens." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the clean truth she wanted, but it was honest in a way that mattered. "All right," Evelyn said. "Tell me about this trap." They spent the next hour planning, Daniel's tactical experience combining with Evelyn's knowledge of her company's internal systems to create something that might actually work. They would let Dr. Marsh continue his work, but leak information suggesting he was making faster progress than expected. They would monitor who reacted to the news, track communication patterns, wait for someone to make a mistake. It was dangerous. It was risky. It assumed their opponent would be impatient or desperate enough to act before they were ready, but it was a plan. I should get back, Daniel said finally, checking his phone. Maya will be waking up in a few hours. Mrs. Chen's great, but she gets nervous if I'm gone too long. Daniel! Evelyn stopped him at the door. Thank you for telling me the truth, or as much of it as you could. Thank you for not running when you had every reason to. He smiled slightly. Partners? Partners, she agreed. He left, disappearing into the elevator bay. Evelyn remained in her office, watching the city wake up beneath her. The sun starting to paint the eastern sky in shades of amber and rose, the first commuters trickling onto the streets. Another day beginning for millions of people who had no idea what was happening in the towers above them. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael Chen. Found something. You need to see this. She made her way back to the security office, her exhaustion forgotten in a fresh surge of adrenaline. Michael had security footage pulled up. Different camera, different angle. This is from the parking garage 2 hours ago, he said. Your husband. Making a call. Evelyn watched Daniel's image on the screen, his body language guarded, his expression serious. No audio. The cameras didn't have microphones in the garage. But something about the way he stood, the careful checking of his surroundings before he dialed, suggested this wasn't a casual conversation. Can we trace the number? She asked. She already tried. It's encrypted, bouncing through international servers. Whoever he called, they're using serious counter-surveillance. Michael looked at her carefully. Ms. Hart, I know you said to proceed carefully with Mr. Park, but this is beyond suspicious. This is tradecraft, professional-level operational security. Evelyn thought about the conversation she'd just had with Daniel, the partial truths and careful revelations, the admission of a past he couldn't fully explain. I know, she said quietly. Monitor him, record everything, but don't approach him directly. Not yet. May I ask why? Because he'd told her he wasn't her enemy. Because he'd looked her in the eye and promised not to lie about things that mattered. Because some instinct she didn't fully trust yet told her that Daniel Park, whoever he really was, might be the only person she could rely on in the storm that was coming. But she couldn't say any of that to Michael. So instead she said, because I need to know who he's working for before we make any moves. If he has connections to intelligence agencies or military contractors, confronting him prematurely could shut down our investigation entirely. We play this smart. We play it patient. Michael didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn left him to his surveillance and took the private elevator up to the executive floor. She needed a shower, needed coffee, needed sleep she wasn't going to get. In 6 hours, she had a board meeting. In 8 hours, she'd promised to read to Maya again. And somewhere in between, she had to figure out how to run a company while hunting for traitors and managing a marriage that was becoming more complicated with every passing hour. The penthouse was silent when she entered. Daniel's wing showed no light under the door. She moved to her bedroom, stripped off her clothes, and stood under scalding water until her thoughts stopped racing enough to think clearly. Someone was stealing her father's secrets. Daniel had a past that intersected with those secrets in ways she didn't fully understand. And she was caught between corporate responsibility, legal obligations, and something that felt increasingly like actual trust in a man she'd married for all the wrong reasons. Outside her bathroom window, the sun continued its rise over Manhattan. Traffic thickened. Phones began ringing in offices across the city. Another day of business and betrayal, deals and deceptions, the endless churn of modern life. In a hotel room 12 blocks away, a woman with cold eyes and military bearing made a call to report that Ghost was compromised. The asset was suspicious, and the operation was accelerating beyond their control. She received new orders, ended the call, and began assembling weapons that officially didn't exist. In the Hart Technologies server room, Dr. Marsh worked through mathematical problems that would take days to solve, unaware that his progress was being monitored by 3 separate parties, all with different agendas. And in the penthouse apartment where a CEO and a ghost pretended to be husband and wife, 2 people tried to sleep while the same questions circled their minds. How much truth was too dangerous to share? How much trust was too risky to give? And when the lies finally collapsed, because they always collapsed eventually, would either of them survive the explosion? The game was moving faster now. The players were showing their hands piece by careful piece. And somewhere in the shadows where the truly dangerous people operated, someone was watching it all unfold with satisfaction. Because this was the plan. This was always the plan. Get the daughter suspicious. Get the ghost exposed. Let them trust each other just enough to be vulnerable. And then strike, hard and final, before either of them realized they'd been playing by someone else's rules from the very beginning. The storm was building. Thunder rumbled on a horizon only a few people could see. And when it finally broke over Manhattan, the casualties would be measured not in property or money, but in lives shattered and secrets that should have stayed buried forever. But that was still days away. Right now, there was only the illusion of control, the desperate hope that understanding your enemies was enough to defeat them, and the fragile alliance between two people who'd married for convenience and were learning, too late perhaps, that nothing about their arrangement had ever been convenient at all. 3 days of careful surveillance produced nothing but ghosts and dead ends. Whoever had accessed the Ghost Protocol files had gone completely silent, as if they knew they were being watched. Dr. Marsh continued his encryption work while Evelyn attended board meetings and pretended everything was normal. Daniel maintained his cover as the quiet husband who cleaned offices and raised his daughter, all while feeding information to contacts Evelyn wasn't supposed to know about. The charade was exhausting for everyone involved. It was Thursday evening when everything changed. Evelyn had left work early for once, keeping her promise to read to Maya. The little girl had graduated from fairy tales to adventure stories, pirates and treasure maps, and brave heroes who always won in the end. The kind of simple narratives where good and evil were clearly marked and justice always prevailed. Real life, Evelyn was learning, was considerably messier.
Come with me.
Can we have ice cream after? Maya asked as they finished the chapter. Daddy said only if you said yes. Passing the responsibility to me? That's tactical. Evelyn closed the book. Small bowl, and only if you brush your teeth after. Maya launched herself at Evelyn in a hug that was entirely too trusting, too open. You're the best. I'm going to tell Daddy. She raced out of the room before Evelyn could respond, leaving her alone with the sudden uncomfortable realization that she'd started looking forward to these evening sessions. That Maya's enthusiasm felt less like an obligation and more like something dangerously close to affection. She was getting attached. They both were. And attachment was the one thing their arrangement absolutely couldn't afford. Daniel appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel. Ice cream negotiation successful? She drives a hard bargain. Gets that from you, probably. Gets it from her mother, actually. The words were out before Daniel could stop them, and Evelyn saw him tense, realizing he'd opened a door he usually kept firmly closed. You never talk about her, Evelyn said carefully. Maya's mother. No, Daniel agreed. I don't. Was she... Evelyn stopped, unsure if she had the right to ask, but curiosity won over caution. Was she part of your old life? Before you retired? Daniel leaned against the doorframe, his expression distant. She was an analyst. Smart, principled, believed in the mission even when the mission stopped making sense. We met on assignment, got too close, and Maya happened before we'd thought through any of the implications. He paused. She died when Maya was 2. Car accident in Brussels that probably wasn't an accident at all. And I realized that the life I'd chosen, the work I did, it destroyed everyone who got close to it, so I got out. I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't cause it. His eyes refocused on her. But it's why I'm so careful about Maya, why I keep her separated from everything else. She's the only good thing I've managed not to ruin yet. Before Evelyn could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop. It's Michael. Emergency. The call connected before she could say hello. Ms. Hart, we have a situation. Someone just tried to physically breach the server room, armed. Our security team engaged, but gunfire crackled through the phone. We need you to stay away from the building. I'm calling NYPD, but whoever these people are, they're professional. Military-grade weapons, coordinated tactics. I'm coming in, Evelyn said, already moving toward her bedroom. No, Ms. Hart, it's not safe. The line went dead. Evelyn stood frozen, her heart hammering. Behind her, Daniel had gone completely still, his entire demeanor shifting in a way that made her skin prickle with sudden awareness. How many? He asked, his voice utterly calm. What? How many attackers? What's the building's security response protocol? Where's your safe room? The questions came rapid fire, delivered with the precision of someone conducting a tactical assessment. This wasn't the careful janitor or the patient father. This was something else entirely. I don't know. Michael didn't... Evelyn's phone lit up with alerts. Building security system, multiple breach points, cameras going offline one by one. They're systematically taking out our surveillance. This is coordinated. They're going for the ghost protocol files. Whatever Dr. Marsh found, they can't let him finish. Daniel was already moving toward his wing. Stay here. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone. Where are you going? He paused at the threshold, and when he looked back, his eyes were hard and cold. The eyes of someone who'd seen and done things that left permanent scars. To stop them, before they kill everyone in that building looking for information that shouldn't exist. Daniel, you can't. But he was already gone, disappearing into his room. Evelyn followed, propriety abandoned in the face of crisis, and stopped in the doorway. Daniel's closet was open. Behind the ordinary clothes hung a gear bag she'd never seen before. He was pulling out equipment with practiced efficiency. Body armor, tactical vest, weapons that absolutely shouldn't have been in a civilian residence. He moved like someone who'd done this 1,000 times, every motion economical and purposeful. What are you? Evelyn whispered. Someone who made a promise to protect you. He checked a pistol with the casual expertise of a professional, then looked at her directly. I can explain everything later. Right now, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Evelyn thought about all the careful distance they'd maintained, all the lies and half-truths and protected secrets. And under it all, a single question that mattered more than anything else. Was Daniel Park, whoever he really was, someone she could trust when everything fell apart? Yes, she said, but I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. It's my company, my responsibility, and I'm not staying here helpless while people die protecting my father's secrets. She moved to her own closet, pulling out the handgun her father had insisted she learn to shoot. I know how to use this. I'm a decent shot. And you'll need someone who knows the building's layout, the security protocols, where the backup systems are. You'll get yourself killed. Then you better make sure I don't. Evelyn checked the weapons magazine, surprised at how steady her hands were. Fear was there, cold and sharp, but under it was something harder. Anger. Determination. The realization that she was tired of being protected from the consequences of choices other people had made. Daniel studied her for a long moment. Then with visible reluctance, he nodded. Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say, when I say it. And if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments, no hesitation. Agreed? Agreed. Maya is with Mrs. Chen. She's safe. Evelyn was already moving toward the door. We need to go. Now. They took the private elevator down to the garage, Daniel checking his phone and reading information from sources Evelyn couldn't identify. 3 teams, maybe 4. They hit the building 8 minutes ago. NYPD response time is another 6 minutes minimum. Security's being overrun on floors 12 through 15. The server room is on 14, Evelyn said. Dr. Marsh was working late. Then that's where we're going. The elevator opened into the parking garage. Daniel moved out first, weapon raised, scanning for threats with the fluid efficiency of someone who'd done this in places far more dangerous than Manhattan parking structures. Clear. Your car or mine? Mine. Armored. My father was paranoid. Your father was smart. They made it to Hart Technologies in 11 minutes, running red lights and driving like the city was a war zone. Maybe it was. The building's lobby was chaos when they arrived. Security personnel taking cover behind marble columns, return fire coming from the upper floors, civilians evacuating in panicked streams. Daniel caught the arm of a security guard Evelyn recognized. Martinez, situation report. Martinez stared at the weapons in Daniel's hands with obvious shock. Who the hell are you? Someone who's going to help. Talk. Something in Daniel's tone cut through Martinez's confusion. 4 hostiles, maybe more. They came in through the delivery entrance with forged credentials, started shooting when security tried to verify. They're pushing toward the server room. We've got 3 guards wounded, 1 dead. Chen's trying to hold them on 14, but they're outgunned. Stairwells? East stairwell's clear. West is compromised. Elevators are locked down. Good. Daniel turned to Evelyn. Last chance to stay here. Not happening. He didn't argue further, just moved toward the east stairwell with Evelyn close behind. The building she'd walked through every day for years felt alien now. The familiar corridors transformed into tactical terrain, every corner a potential ambush point, every shadow hiding threats she'd never had to consider before. They climbed 14 floors in near silence, Daniel pausing at each landing to listen before proceeding. At the 14th floor entrance, he held up a fist. Stop. Evelyn pressed against the wall, her heart hammering so loud she was sure it would give away their position. Voices filtered through the door. 2 men, speaking in clipped professional tones. Southwest corner. Marsh is holed up in the secondary server room. He's got the encryption keys on a portable drive. We secure that, we extract, mission complete. What about witnesses? Sanitize as we go, no loose ends. Evelyn felt ice slide through her veins. They were going to kill Dr. Marsh, kill anyone who got in their way. And she'd brought him into this, asked him to break her father's encryption, made him a target without understanding the stakes. Daniel looked at her, his expression grim. He held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. The door exploded inward as he kicked it open, his weapon already tracking targets. The 2 men in the corridor barely had time to react before Daniel was on them. Not shooting, not yet, but moving with a precision that turned violence into something almost artistic. 1 man went down with a strike to the throat. The second tried to bring his rifle up, but Daniel was already inside his guard, redirecting the weapon and delivering a blow that sent the attacker crumpling. It was over in seconds. Evelyn stood frozen, her weapon half raised, watching the man she'd married move like controlled death through space that should have been impossible to navigate that fast. Clear, Daniel said quietly, already moving forward. Stay close. They found Michael Chen and 2 other guards barricaded behind an overturned desk near the server room entrance. Michael's left arm hung useless, blood soaking through a makeshift bandage. When he saw Daniel, his expression cycled through shock, confusion, and dawning realization. You're not maintenance, he said flatly. No, Daniel agreed. I'm not. Where's Marsh? Secondary server room. There's 2 more hostiles between us and him. They've got better positions, better gear. We can't... Michael stopped as fresh gunfire erupted from ahead. They're pushing forward. Not anymore. Daniel turned to Evelyn. You stay here. Help Chen with the wounded. I'm going to get Marsh. Daniel, no arguments. You promised. He looked at her, and for just a moment, the cold tactical mask slipped enough to show something warmer beneath. Trust me. Then he was gone, moving down the corridor toward the sound of gunfire with the calm purposefulness of someone who'd walked into far worse situations and walked back out alive. Evelyn crouched beside Michael, applying pressure to his wound while her mind raced. Who is he? Michael asked through gritted teeth. Your husband. Who the hell is he really? I don't know, Evelyn admitted, but I'm starting to think I should have asked better questions before I married him. The gunfire ahead intensified, short controlled bursts, tactical and precise. Then silence. Long, terrible silence that stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably less than a minute. Daniel emerged from the smoke-hazed corridor with Dr. Marsh stumbling beside him, the older man's face sheet-white with shock. Behind them, in the dim light, Evelyn could see 2 more bodies sprawled in positions that suggested they'd never seen Daniel coming. We need to move, Daniel said, helping Marsh toward their position. There's more coming. I counted at least 2 additional teams approaching from below. This wasn't just about stealing files. This was about sending a message. What kind of message? Evelyn demanded. The kind that says no one touches Ghost Protocol and lives to talk about it. Daniel checked his weapon, his expression grim. Where's your panic room, the real one, not the official one listed in building schematics? Evelyn stared at him. How do you know about... Because I helped design half the security in this building 5 years ago, when your father hired a consultant team for threat assessment. I know where the real safe room is. I know where the backup generators are, and I know that if we don't move in the next 30 seconds, we're going to be overrun by professionals who've been told to leave no witnesses. Sirens wailed in the distance. NYPD finally arriving, but distance meant nothing if they died before help reached them. Northeast corner, Evelyn said, making the decision. Behind the false wall in my father's old office. Biometric lock. Can you access it? Yes. Then we go. Now. Daniel helped Michael stand, supporting the injured man's weight. Martinez, you're on point with Ms. Hart. Chen, you're with me. Marsh, stay in the middle and try not to panic more than absolutely necessary. Move. They moved through corridors Evelyn had walked 1,000 times, now transformed into a war zone. Smoke drifted from damaged systems. Emergency lights cast everything in red-tinged shadow. Somewhere below, she could hear NYPD breaching the building, but it felt impossibly far away. Her father's office was untouched, preserved exactly as he'd left it 6 months ago. Evelyn had avoided this room since his death, unable to face the memories and implications. Now she pressed her palm to the hidden biometric scanner behind his favorite painting, a military scene, soldiers in some unnamed war, and felt the click of locks disengaging. The wall panel slid open to reveal a space that looked more like a military command center than a panic room. Screens showed building security feeds. Communication equipment lined one wall, and in the corner, locked in a cabinet that would require serious explosives to breach, sat files that were probably as dangerous as anything in Ghost Protocol. Inside, Daniel ordered. Martinez, you're on door security. No one gets through without my authorization. They filed in, Marsh collapsing into a chair and clutching his portable drive like a lifeline. Michael slumped against the wall, his face gray with blood loss. Evelyn moved to the medical supplies she knew her father kept stocked and started working on Michael's arm with hands that shook only slightly. Daniel secured the door, then moved to the communication equipment and began making calls on encrypted lines. This is Ghost. Authorization code Whiskey Sierra 7. I need immediate extraction. Location transmitted. Multiple hostiles, building compromised, asset is secure but vulnerable. Estimated hostile count is 8 to 12. Professional grade equipment and training. NYPD is on scene but outmatched. We need, yes. Understood. ETA? He listened, his expression darkening. 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours. Can you? He paused. All right. We hold until then. Ghost out. Evelyn finished bandaging Michael's arm and moved to where Daniel stood studying the security monitors. Outside their shelter, she could see figures moving through corridors. Not NYPD, not her security team, but the attackers, searching methodically floor by floor. Who did you call? She asked quietly. People who owe me favors. Daniel pointed to one of the monitors. They're being thorough, checking every room, every possible hiding spot. Eventually, they'll find this room. Can we hold them off? For a while. This room was designed to withstand prolonged assault, but those people out there know what they're doing. They're not random mercenaries. They're trained operators, probably former military, definitely experienced in breach tactics. He looked at her directly, which means whoever sent them has serious resources and isn't afraid to use them. My father, Evelyn said softly. This goes back to him, doesn't it? To whatever he built, whatever deals he made. Yes, Project Sentinel, among other things. Daniel pulled up files on one of the computers, documents Evelyn had never seen, technical specifications that made her stomach turn. Your father didn't just build defense systems, Evelyn. He built control systems, technology that could monitor, track, and eliminate targets anywhere in the world with minimal human oversight. And he sold access to that technology to anyone willing to pay enough, regardless of their intentions or affiliations. You're saying my father was a traitor. I'm saying your father was a businessman who stopped seeing people as people and started seeing them as assets to be managed or threats to be eliminated. And when you think like that long enough, the lines blur. Patriotism becomes negotiable. Ethics become obstacles. Daniel's voice was flat, matter of fact. I know because I worked for him, because I helped build parts of Sentinel before I understood what it would become. And when I finally saw the full picture, when I realized what we'd created, I tried to shut it down. Is that why you left? Why you retired? I left because people started dying, good people, who were asking the same questions I was asking, Car accidents, muggings gone wrong, heart attacks in men who were perfectly healthy a week before. He gestured at the screens showing the attackers outside. This is what happens when you threaten something worth billions of dollars and the security of people powerful enough to make entire agencies look the other way. Evelyn felt the room tilt slightly. My father had people killed. Your father protected his interests, so did his partners, his clients, his investors. And now you've inherited that whole nightmare, whether you wanted it or not. Why didn't you tell me this before? The anger in her voice surprised her. Why marry me, move into my home, let me trust you, if you knew? Because I needed to know if you were complicit or innocent, if you were continuing his work or trying to build something different. Daniel turned to face her fully. And because somewhere in the middle of watching you fight with your board and stay up until 3 a.m. trying to fix contracts your father poisoned and read bedtime stories to my daughter, like it actually matters, I realized you're nothing like him. You're trying to build something legitimate out of a foundation soaked in blood. And that matters. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Before Evelyn could respond, Dr. Marsh spoke up from his corner. I broke the encryption. About an hour before they attacked. I was about to call you when they breached the building. Every head turned toward him. He held up the portable drive with trembling hands. Ghost Protocol isn't a project. It's a client list. Everyone your father sold Sentinel technology to, every organization that's using his systems right now, every government official who took money to look the other way. It's comprehensive, detailed, and absolutely damning. How damning? Evelyn asked. Pentagon officials, senators, foreign intelligence services, private military contractors operating in places the U.S. officially doesn't go. And transactions, money moving through accounts that shouldn't exist, payments for operations that never happened. Marsh's voice shook. If this goes public, it won't just destroy Hart Technologies. It'll trigger investigations that reach into the highest levels of government. People will go to prison. Others will probably die trying to make sure that doesn't happen. Daniel swore softly. That's why they're here. Not just to get the files, but to eliminate everyone who's seen them. Then we destroy the drive, Evelyn said. Right now, we can't. Marsh looked miserable. I sent a backup to secure cloud storage before they breached. Thought I was being careful. If they kill me, if they get this drive, the backup triggers automatically in 72 hours and releases everything to major news organizations worldwide. A dead man's switch, Daniel said flatly. You built a dead man's switch. I thought it would protect me. I didn't know they'd... Marsh broke off as explosions echoed from somewhere outside their safe room. What was that? Daniel checked the monitors and his expression went cold. They're breaching the outer security doors, professional grade charges. They'll have this room open in under 10 minutes. What about your people? Your extraction? 15 minutes out. Maybe less if they're pushing hard. Daniel pulled weapons from the room's emergency cabinet, checking ammunition with practiced efficiency. We hold here. Martinez, Chen, if you can manage it, you take positions by the door. First person through gets put down hard. Second and third will be more cautious. That's when I move. You can't take them all, Evelyn protested. No, Daniel agreed, but I can slow them down long enough for backup to arrive. Maybe. Daniel. He crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands finding her shoulders. Listen to me. When the door breaches, you get behind the communication equipment. It's reinforced. You stay low, you stay quiet, and you survive. Understood? You're talking like you're not going to... I'm talking like a soldier who knows the odds and plans accordingly. His grip tightened slightly. Maya is with Mrs. Chen. If something happens to me, there's a safety deposit box at Chase Manhattan, downtown branch. Key is taped behind the family photo in my apartment. Everything she'll need is in there. Money, documents, contacts who can help. You're not dying today. Probably not. But if I do, I need to know she'll be taken care of. His eyes searched hers. Promise me. Evelyn felt something crack open in her chest. The careful distance they'd maintained shattering completely in the face of Daniel's stark honesty. I promise. But you're not dying, because I just figured out that I actually give a damn about this marriage being real, and I'm not letting you disappear before we figure out what that means. Daniel's expression shifted. Surprise, warmth, and something that might have been hope flickering across his features before another explosion rocked the room. The outer door was failing. Smoke seeped through cracks in the reinforced structure. "Positions," Daniel said quietly, the moment breaking as quickly as it had formed. "They're coming." Martinez and Michael took cover behind equipment that wouldn't save them if the attackers came in hard. Marsh clutched his portable drive and pressed himself into the corner. Evelyn moved to where Daniel had indicated, her weapon ready even though she knew she was hopelessly outmatched if it came to actual combat. The final explosion was deafening. The door buckled, smoke and fire washing through the opening. Daniel moved before the debris settled, his weapon tracking targets Evelyn couldn't even see through the chaos. Gunfire erupted, sharp, controlled bursts that spoke of training and experience. Someone screamed, bodies fell. Daniel moved like liquid shadow through the smoke, each shot precise and economical. But there were too many. For every attacker that went down, another pushed forward. They were being overrun despite Daniel's tactical excellence. Then something changed. New gunfire, different sound, different cadence. The attackers suddenly found themselves caught between Daniel's position and someone else firing from the corridor. Evelyn heard someone shout tactical orders in clipped military speak, and the assault faltered, then broke completely. When the smoke cleared, Daniel stood in the ruined doorway, his weapon still raised, facing a woman in tactical gear who matched him move for move in a frozen standoff. "Stand down, Ghost," the woman said, her voice cool and professional. "We're friendlies." "Prove it." She lowered her weapon fractionally and pulled something from her vest. A badge, official and legitimate. "Call sign Phoenix, sent by Colonel Ashford. You requested extraction 15 minutes ago. We're here." Daniel lowered his weapon slowly, tension draining from his shoulders. "Took you long enough." Traffic was hell. Phoenix looked past him to where Evelyn stood, taking in the scene with quick assessment. "This the asset?" "She's not an asset, she's my wife." Daniel's voice carried an edge of warning. "And she doesn't leave my sight. That's non-negotiable." Phoenix's eyebrow raised slightly. "Seems like the lines got blurry, Ghost. That could be a problem." "Then it's my problem to manage." Daniel turned to Evelyn. "Phoenix and her team are going to secure this location. We're getting out before whoever's left of the assault team regroups." Evelyn looked at the bodies scattered in the corridor, the destruction, the blood. Then she looked at Daniel, the man she'd married on a whim, who'd just fought through a building full of killers to protect her and the secrets her father left behind. "Who are you?" she asked for the second time that night. Daniel met her eyes, and in them she saw exhaustion, regret, and something like resignation. Former Special Operations Commander Daniel Park, retired from a unit you've never heard of that handles problems the government can't officially acknowledge. "I spent 15 years hunting threats in places that don't exist, eliminating targets who'd never see trial. I was the best at what I did, and what I did has more blood on it than I'll ever wash away. The truth, finally, complete and unvarnished." "And now?" Evelyn asked softly. "Now I'm just a man trying to protect the people he cares about, starting with you." Daniel extended his hand. "Come on. We need to move before this gets worse." Evelyn took his hand, felt the calluses and strength and steadiness of it, and let him lead her out of the shattered safe room into whatever came next. Behind them, Phoenix directed her team through cleanup operations with military efficiency. The building would be secured. The bodies would disappear. Official reports would tell whatever story needed to be told to keep the truth buried. But the truth had a way of surfacing anyway. And as Daniel and Evelyn emerged into the Manhattan night, police lights painting everything in alternating colors of red and blue, both of them knew the same thing without having to say it aloud. The mask had fallen. The lies were over. And whatever happened next would be built on the foundation of who they actually were, not who they'd pretended to be for 3 months of careful distance. The question was whether that foundation could bear the weight of everything that was still coming, the enemies still circling, the secrets still hiding in Ghost Protocol files, and the increasingly real feelings developing between two people who'd started this as nothing but a convenient arrangement. The storm had broken. Now they just had to survive it. The safe house was 30 miles outside Manhattan, buried in the kind of suburban anonymity that made it perfect for hiding people who needed to disappear. Phoenix's team had swept them out of Hart Technologies before NYPD could ask questions that had no good answers, loading them into unmarked vehicles that melted into city traffic like they'd never existed. Evelyn sat in the safe house's kitchen at 4 in the morning, watching Daniel clean weapons at the table with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. Dr. Marsh was asleep upstairs, sedated by a medic who'd appeared and vanished without introduction. Michael Chen had been taken to a private hospital, not the kind that asked questions about gunshot wounds. "You should rest," Daniel said without looking up from the disassembled pistol in front of him. "You've been running on adrenaline for 6 hours. When it crashes, you'll crash hard." "Can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see those men storming the building, see you moving through them like—" She stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Like a killer?" Daniel's voice was flat. "That's what I was trained to be. What I was very good at being." "That's not what I was going to say." Evelyn wrapped her hands around a coffee mug that had gone cold an hour ago. "I was going to say, like someone who'd done it so many times, it was muscle memory, and that's almost more frightening than the violence itself." Daniel finally looked up, his dark eyes unreadable. "You want me to apologize for keeping you alive? I want you to help me understand who I actually married, because the man I proposed to 3 months ago doesn't exist, does he? That was just a cover, a role you were playing." "Yes and no." Daniel set down the gun parts and leaned back in his chair. "The cover was real enough. I really am a single father trying to give my daughter a normal life. I really do want to stay invisible and avoid the kind of attention that gets people killed. But you're right that I wasn't being completely honest about why I needed those things. So be honest now. All of it. No more operational security or classified restrictions. If we're going to survive what's coming, I need to know exactly who I'm dealing with." Daniel was silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the table in a rhythm that might have been nervous energy or tactical calculation. Finally, he began to speak, his voice low and measured. "I joined the military at 18, Special Forces at 22. By 25, I was being recruited for a unit that doesn't have an official name or designation. We handled situations where plausible deniability was more important than success metrics, targeted eliminations, intelligence gathering in hostile territories, operations that would start wars if they ever came to light." He paused. "I was good at it. Too good. I could get into places no one else could reach, eliminate targets no one else could touch, and disappear before anyone knew I'd been there. They called me Ghost because that's what I was. A phantom that enemy combatants whispered about but could never prove existed." Evelyn felt cold despite the safe house's heating. "How many people did you kill?" "I stopped counting after 50. By the time I retired, the number was well into triple digits." He said it without inflection, but she could see the weight of it in his posture. Most of them were legitimate threats. Terrorists planning attacks, arms dealers selling weapons to groups that would use them on civilians, but some, his jaw tightened. "Some were targets I was told were threats, but later turned out to be inconvenient witnesses or political obstacles. By the time I figured that out, I'd already pulled the trigger. That's when you tried to get out. That's when I started asking questions I wasn't supposed to ask. And one of those questions led me to your father's company, to Project Sentinel and the technology he was building. I was assigned to provide security consultation, but really I was there to assess whether Hart Technologies was a threat to national security or a valuable asset worth protecting." "And what did you conclude?" Daniel's smile was bitter. "I concluded that your father was a genius who'd created something so dangerous that multiple governments wanted it, and none of them could be trusted with it. The AI surveillance systems, the autonomous targeting protocols, the global reach, put together, Sentinel was basically a god machine that could track, analyze, and eliminate any target anywhere in the world. And your father was selling access to the highest bidder. So you tried to shut it down. I tried to report it through proper channels, filed classified reports with my commanding officers, went up the chain of command as far as I could go." Daniel's expression hardened. "And then people started dying. My unit commander, 2 analysts who'd helped me compile evidence, a congressional staffer who was asking questions about Hart Technologies contracts, all of them, officially, accidents or natural causes. But I knew better. You realized the operation went higher than you thought. I realized that Project Sentinel had protection at levels I couldn't reach, Pentagon, State Department, maybe higher, and that anyone who threatened it would be eliminated, regardless of their service record or clearances. He met her eyes. That included me. So I did what I do best. I disappeared, changed my identity, buried my past, and became exactly the kind of invisible nobody that my former employers wouldn't waste resources hunting. A single father working maintenance, someone too ordinary to be worth a second look. Until my father died and things started moving again. Until your father died and I got a call from my old commanding officer, Colonel Ashford. She told me that Hart Technologies was still running operations connected to Sentinel, that your father's death might not have been natural, and that if the wrong people got control of the company, we were looking at a weapons system in the hands of people with no oversight and no accountability. Evelyn felt the pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. She asked you to get close to me, to watch me, to figure out if I was part of it or just a convenient inheritor. Yes, and when you came to me with that marriage proposal, Daniel shook his head. I thought it was the perfect opportunity. I could get inside your life, monitor your activities, report back on whether you were continuing your father's work or trying to build something different. It was supposed to be simple surveillance. In and out, minimal emotional involvement, clean exit when the job was done. But it wasn't simple. No, the word came out rough, because you turned out to be exactly what you appeared to be. Someone trying to do the right thing in a situation you didn't fully understand. And Maya, his voice softened. Maya fell in love with you almost immediately, started talking about you like you were family, and I realized that somewhere in the middle of this operational nightmare, I'd put the two people I care most about in the same place, and if things went wrong, I'd lose both of you. Evelyn absorbed this, her mind working through implications and complications. The attack tonight, that wasn't random. No, someone knew Dr. Marsh was close to breaking the encryption. Someone who has enough resources to put together a professional hit team and send them into downtown Manhattan. Someone who's willing to kill dozens of people to keep Ghost Protocol buried. Daniel's expression was grim. And based on the equipment and tactics I saw, I'd bet they're connected to some of the same people I used to work for. Which means this goes deep into the intelligence community. So what do? We can't fight the government. We don't fight them. We expose them. Dr. Marsh's dead man switch gives us leverage. If they kill us, the files go public and everyone goes down. So we negotiate from a position of mutually assured destruction. We offer them a deal. We keep quiet about what your father built. And in exchange, Sentinel gets permanently shut down, the client list stays buried, and Hart Technologies gets cleaned up without prosecution. They'll never agree to that. The technology is too valuable. They will if the alternative is worse. Daniel pulled out his phone, the secure one she'd seen him use before. Phoenix isn't just extraction support. She's Ashford's second in command. Between the three of us, we have enough evidence and testimony to prove that Project Sentinel exists, that it's been used for illegal operations, and that multiple officials across several agencies have been complicit in covering it up. That's not just a scandal. That's the kind of revelation that ends careers and triggers congressional investigations. You do that? Expose your own people? They stopped being my people when they started killing innocents to protect their interests. And they definitely stopped being my people when they put you in danger. Daniel stood, moving to the window to check the perimeter with habitual caution. I made a choice 3 months ago when I married you. I told myself it was just operational cover, but somewhere along the way it became real. You became real, and I'm not letting you get destroyed by the same system that tried to destroy me. Before Evelyn could respond, footsteps on the stairs announced Dr. Marsh's arrival. The older man looked terrible, pale, exhausted, his hands still trembling slightly from shock and sedatives wearing off. I heard voices, he said quietly. Couldn't sleep anyway. Every time I close my eyes, I see them coming through the door. That's normal, Daniel said, his tone gentler. It'll fade, eventually. Will it? Marsh sank into a chair. I'm a mathematician. I work with encryption and algorithms. I'm not built for violence. No one's built for violence, Dr. Marsh. We just adapt or break. Daniel returned to the table. But you did something important tonight. You broke encryption that was supposed to be unbreakable. You got us leverage that might be the only thing keeping us alive. That took courage. Or stupidity. I'm still not sure which. Marsh pulled the portable drive from his pocket, staring at it like it might bite him. This thing has cost people their lives. It's going to cost more lives before this is finished. Maybe I should just destroy it. End this whole nightmare. Can't do that, Evelyn said firmly. The backup you created is our insurance policy. Without it, we're just witnesses who can be eliminated quietly. With it, we're problems that create bigger problems if we disappear. She's right, Daniel agreed. The question is what we do with the information. We could go public, leak it to journalists, trigger investigations, bring down everyone involved. But that destroys Hart Technologies and probably ruins your life in the process. Or we use it as leverage to force a negotiated settlement. Shut down the dangerous operations, clean up the company, and let the guilty parties retire quietly rather than facing prison. That's not justice, Evelyn said. No, it's pragmatism. Justice would be satisfying but ultimately counterproductive. Half the names on that client list are people running countries we depend on for security cooperation. Foreign intelligence services that share information that saves American lives. Defense contractors who build equipment our military needs. Bringing them all down doesn't make the world safer. It just creates chaos that someone worse fills. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to insist that exposure and accountability mattered more than stability. But she'd spent enough time running a defense contractor to know that Daniel was probably right. The world ran on compromises and gray areas, not clear moral lines. There's another option, she said slowly. We take over. Not just Hart Technologies, but the whole network. We use my position as CEO and your connections to Ashford's people to convert Project Sentinel from a criminal enterprise into something legitimate, something with oversight and accountability. We don't destroy the technology, we reform how it's used. Daniel and Marsh both stared at her. That's ambitious, Daniel said finally. Also probably impossible. Why? The infrastructure exists, the technology works. The problem isn't the tool, it's how it's being controlled and who benefits from it. What if we changed that? Made it transparent, put it under independent review boards, used it to protect people instead of just protecting interests? You're talking about reforming a system that's been corrupt for decades, that has buy-in from some of the most powerful people in government and industry. Daniel's tone was skeptical, but not dismissive. They won't let you just walk in and take over. They will if the alternative is exposure and prosecution. We make them an offer, cooperate with the reform, accept the new oversight structures, or we release everything and let the investigations begin. Some will fight, some will probably try to kill us. But enough will see the pragmatic choice and take it. Marsh was nodding slowly. It could work. If you had the right legal framework, the right political cover, He stopped. You'd need congressional support. Senate Intelligence Committee, at minimum. Someone with enough clout to provide air cover when the pushback starts. I know someone, Daniel said quietly. Senator Morrison. She's been trying to reform intelligence oversight for years, but never had enough evidence to push past institutional resistance. Give her ghost protocol files and a plan for legitimate reform, and she'd probably back it. Especially if it means putting her name on something that makes headlines for the right reasons instead of the usual partisan nonsense. So we have leverage, we have a plan, and we potentially have political support. Evelyn felt something like hope stirring beneath the exhaustion. What we don't have is time. Whoever ordered that attack isn't going to wait patiently while we organize a reform movement. They'll come at us again, harder and with more resources. Which is why we move first. Daniel pulled out his phone. I call Ashford. We set up a meeting with everyone who needs to be in the room. Her, Morrison, whatever DoD officials we can trust. We lay out what we know, what we have, and what we're offering. And we do it in the next 48 hours before our enemies have time to regroup. That's a very tight timeline. Tight timelines are how you win. Keep moving. Keep your enemies reactive. Don't give them time to organize proper resistance. Daniel looked at her seriously. But Evelyn, you need to understand what you're signing up for here. If we do this, you're not just cleaning up your father's company. You're declaring war on some of the most dangerous people in the world. They'll come after you personally. They'll dig into every aspect of your life looking for leverage, and they absolutely will try to kill you if they think they can get away with it. They already tried that tonight. Didn't work out well for them. Tonight was a tactical assault by hired professionals. What comes next will be subtler: character assassination, legal challenges, accidents that look like accidents. His jaw tightened. They'll go after Maya, use her as leverage against me, use me as leverage against you. Then we protect each other. That's what partners do. Evelyn stood, moving to where Daniel sat. You've been protecting me since before I knew you were protecting me. Now it's time for me to step up. This is my company, my responsibility, my father's mess to clean up. And I'm not doing it alone anymore. I'm doing it with you. Daniel looked up at her, and something shifted in his expression, the careful control slipping enough to show vulnerability beneath. You realize this means our marriage stops being fake. If we're partners in this, if we're facing these threats together, we can't maintain the distance we've been keeping. We'll need to actually trust each other, actually depend on each other. I know. Evelyn reached out, her hand finding his. And somewhere in the last 6 hours, I realized I already do trust you. Maybe that's stupid. Maybe I'm being naive. But when you stood between me and armed killers, when you laid out everything you'd done and who you'd been without flinching, when you talked about protecting Maya like she was the only thing that mattered, I saw who you really are. Not the cover identity, not the operational ghost, but the actual person underneath. And I trust that person. Daniel's fingers tightened around hers. I spent 15 years learning not to feel too much, not to get attached, not to let emotions compromise operational effectiveness. But you, he stopped, seeming to struggle for words. You got past all of that. You and Maya both. And now I'm in this for reasons that have nothing to do with duty or missions or protecting national security. I'm in this because I can't imagine walking away from you, either of you. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Marsh cleared his throat awkwardly. I'll just go check on, I'll be upstairs. He fled, leaving them alone in the safe house kitchen as dawn started painting the windows in shades of gray and gold. Evelyn remained standing close to Daniel, their hands still linked, the careful walls they'd built over 3 months crumbling in the face of shared danger and hard truths. So what do we do now? She asked softly. Now we call Ashford, set up the meeting, start putting together the case for reform instead of exposure. Daniel stood, pulling her closer. And we figure out how to explain to Maya that this arrangement we made is turning into something real. Because she's going to have questions when we stop maintaining separate wings of the apartment. She already thinks we're a real family, has for weeks. She's smarter than both of us put together. Daniel's expression softened. She told me last week that she was glad I'd finally found someone who looked at me like Mom used to. Someone who made me less sad. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Your daughter is terrifyingly perceptive. Runs in the family. Her mother could read people like books. He paused. Would have liked you, I think. Would have appreciated someone willing to fight for what's right, even when it's costly. I wish I could have met her. Me too. Daniel released her hand reluctantly. But right now we have work to do. You should get some rest. The next 48 hours are going to be brutal, and you need to be sharp for what's coming. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to keep talking until everything was laid out and understood. But exhaustion was catching up with her, the adrenaline crash Daniel had predicted hitting like a physical force. Wake me in 4 hours. We'll start making calls. Deal. She made it halfway to the stairs before turning back. Daniel, thank you for keeping me alive tonight, for telling me the truth, for everything. That's what partners do, he said, echoing her earlier words. We protect each other. Evelyn climbed the stairs to the safe house's small bedroom, collapsed onto a bed that smelled faintly of disinfectant and military surplus, and was asleep within seconds. Her dreams were fragmented, gunfire and encryption keys, and her father's face asking questions she couldn't answer. But underneath the chaos was something steadier, the memory of Daniel's hand in hers, his voice promising protection, the gradual realization that somewhere in the middle of this disaster, she'd stopped being alone. Downstairs, Daniel made his calls on encrypted lines to people whose names would never appear in any official records. Colonel Ashford answered on the second ring despite the hour, her voice crisp and alert. Ghost, report. Asset is secure. We have Ghost protocol files and full client list. Situation is complicated, but potentially manageable if we move fast. Define manageable. Daniel laid out Evelyn's plan. Reform instead of exposure. Oversight instead of destruction, turning a criminal enterprise into something legitimate. Ashford listened without interruption, then was silent for a long moment. That's ambitious, she said finally. Also possibly brilliant. If you can pull it off, you solve about 6 problems I've been wrestling with for 3 years. But the blowback is going to be intense. The people you're threatening have long reach and no sense of humor about losing power. I know. Which is why I need support. Serious support, not just extraction teams and safe houses, political cover, legal protection, resources to fight back when they come at us. I can give you some of that, not all, but enough to make you a harder target, and I'll make some calls. Morrison will listen if I frame it right. Maybe some others. Another pause. Ghost, I have to ask, are you compromised? Your report suggested you were maintaining operational distance, but this sounds personal. It is personal. The asset, Evelyn. She's not just an asset anymore. She's my wife. Actually, my wife, not just cover. And I'm not letting her get destroyed by the same people who tried to destroy me. That's what I was afraid of. Ashford's sigh came through clearly. All right, I'll back your play. But if this goes sideways, if the situation becomes untenable, you extract immediately. No heroics, no last stands. You get your family out and disappear. Clear? Clear. Good. I'll have preliminary meetings set up by noon. Be ready to move fast. And Ghost? Don't let your feelings make you stupid. You're one of the best operators I've ever worked with. I'd hate to lose you because you forgot that emotions are liabilities in our line of work. Noted. Daniel ended the call and sat in the growing daylight, thinking about liabilities and assets and the strange mathematics that turned 3 months of convenient arrangement into something worth dying for. Outside, the suburban neighborhood was waking up. Commuters heading to jobs, kids waiting for school buses, the normal rhythm of lives that had nothing to do with classified weapons programs or kill lists or the violent intersection of power and profit. Daniel watched it all through the safe house window and wondered if he and Evelyn would ever get to join that normal world, or if they were too stained by the things they'd learned and done to ever wash completely clean. His phone buzzed with a text from Phoenix. Cleanup complete. Official story is gas leak caused structural failure. No evidence of assault. Your tracks are covered. Another buzz. This one from an unknown number. You should have stayed dead, Ghost. Coming back was a mistake. One will correct soon. Daniel deleted the text but memorized the number for tracing later. Threats were expected. What mattered was whether they came from people with the resources to follow through. And based on everything he'd seen, the answer was almost certainly yes. The war was just beginning. The first shots had been fired, the opening moves made. Now came the hard part, building alliances, exposing enemies, and trying to reform a system that didn't want to be reformed. And doing it all while protecting the 2 people who'd somehow become more important than missions or orders, or the careful operational distance that had kept him alive for 15 years. Daniel checked his weapons again, ran through contingency plans in his mind, and waited for Evelyn to wake up so they could start fighting the next battle together. Because that's what they were now, partners, allies, a team built on shared danger and growing trust. The marriage that had started as cold convenience was becoming something real, forged under fire and sealed in the kind of truth that only emerged when people stopped hiding from each other. Whether that would be enough to survive what was coming remained an open question. But for the first time in years, Daniel found himself believing it might be. That maybe, despite everything, there was still room in this violent world for people trying to do the right thing, even if the right thing might get them killed. 4 hours of sleep felt like 4 minutes when Phoenix shook Evelyn awake with military efficiency and a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been brewed to strip paint. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the safe house windows with the kind of cheerful indifference that made the previous night's violence feel almost surreal. Ashford wants you on a secure video call in 20 minutes, Phoenix said, her tone brooking no argument. Ghost is already prepping downstairs. You'll want to look presentable. Senator Morrison is joining the call, and first impressions matter. Evelyn forced herself upright, her body protesting every movement. She'd fallen asleep in her clothes, which were now wrinkled and stained with smoke residue from the building assault. I don't suppose there's a change of clothes available. Bathroom. Someone pulled your size from department store security tags. Phoenix's expression remained neutral. Welcome to the world of off-book operations. We're very thorough. 20 minutes later, showered and dressed in clothes that fit suspiciously well, Evelyn descended to find the safe house's living room transformed into a makeshift command center. Daniel sat at a laptop connected to equipment that definitely hadn't come from any retail store, his expression focused. Dr. Marsh hovered nearby, the portable drive clutched like a talisman. Ready? Daniel asked, glancing up at her arrival. As I'll ever be. Evelyn took the seat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. The casual proximity felt natural in a way it hadn't 3 months ago. What's the play? We present the evidence, lay out what we know about Ghost Protocol and Project Sentinel. Explain the scope of the corruption and the danger of leaving things as they are. Then we offer the reform plan as an alternative to full exposure. Daniel's fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up files and documentation. Ashford is on our side. Morrison will be skeptical, but potentially sympathetic. The wild card is whoever else they bring to the call. Could be allies. Could be people looking for ammunition to use against us. Comforting. Welcome to politics. It's messier than combat and twice as dangerous. He initiated the connection, and the laptop screen split into multiple video feeds. Colonel Ashford appeared first, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen everything twice. She wore civilian clothes but carried herself with unmistakable military bearing. Ms. Hart, good to finally meet you officially, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Colonel, thank you for the extraction last night. Your team saved our lives. That's what we do. Ashford's attention shifted to Daniel. Ghost, you look terrible. It's been a long night. It's about to get longer. Another video feed activated, showing Senator Catherine Morrison, mid-60s, with the kind of face that suggested she'd fought hard battles and won most of them. Senator, thank you for joining on short notice. Colonel Ashford doesn't call in favors lightly. When she says something's urgent, I listen. Morrison's gaze fixed on Evelyn with sharp intelligence. Ms. Hart, I knew your father, not well, but enough to know he played in some very dark waters. I'm hoping you're not following his path. I'm hoping to correct it, actually. Evelyn kept her voice steady despite the scrutiny, which is why we requested this meeting. A third feed appeared showing a man Evelyn didn't recognize. Late 40s, nondescript in the way that suggested intelligence work rather than political office. This is Michael Brennan, Ashford said, Deputy Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He's read into some aspects of Sentinel and has clearance for this conversation. Some aspects, Brennan repeated dryly, which I'm gathering is about to expand considerably. Ms. Hart, Mr. Park, convince me why I shouldn't have you both arrested for possessing classified information you clearly shouldn't have. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Because the information we possess proves that multiple officials in your agency and others have been complicit in selling illegal surveillance technology to foreign powers and domestic actors with no oversight. And because if you try to arrest us, our insurance policy triggers and every major news organization in the country gets copies of Ghost Protocol files that will make Watergate look like a parking ticket. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Morrison spoke. That's quite a claim. Can you back it up? Dr. Marsh? Evelyn gestured for him to step into camera view. The mathematician moved forward nervously, holding up the portable drive. This drive contains the complete Ghost Protocol files. Client lists, transaction records, operational details for Project Sentinel deployments across 17 countries. Some of those deployments were authorized, most were not. And the people who authorized or facilitated the unauthorized uses include Pentagon officials, sitting senators, foreign intelligence services, and private contractors operating with implicit government protection. Marsh's voice grew steadier as he shifted into technical mode. The encryption your people used was excellent, but not unbreakable. I verified the authenticity through cross-referencing with known operations and public records. This is legitimate, and it's damning. Brennan's expression had gone very still. If what you're claiming is true, releasing this information would compromise active operations, endanger intelligence assets, and destabilize relationships with allied nations. The damage would be catastrophic. Which is why we're not releasing it, Evelyn said. We're offering an alternative. Reform instead of exposure. Accountability instead of scandal. A chance to turn Project Sentinel from a criminal enterprise into something legitimate and properly overseen. Explain, Morrison commanded. Evelyn took a breath and launched into the pitch she and Daniel had refined over the past few hours. Heart Technologies would be restructured under independent oversight. Project Sentinel would be brought into the light with congressional review and constitutional safeguards. The client list would be used to negotiate shutdowns of illegal operations and repatriation of compromised systems. Those who cooperated would face internal discipline rather than prosecution. Those who resisted would be exposed. You're asking for amnesty, Brennan said flatly. For people who've committed treason. We're asking for pragmatism, Daniel countered. Burning down the entire system feels satisfying but accomplishes nothing except creating power vacuums that worse actors fill. We've all seen what happens when intelligence networks collapse without managed transitions. This gives you a controlled demolition instead of an explosion. And what do you get out of this? Morrison asked, her eyes on Evelyn. Besides keeping your company intact? A chance to build something my father should have built. A defense contractor that actually defends rather than exploits. Technology that protects people instead of just protecting profits. Evelyn met the senator's gaze steadily. I inherited a nightmare, Senator. I'm trying to turn it into something I can live with. Something my daughter... She stopped, the words slipping out before she could catch it. Daniel's hand found hers under the table, a brief pressure of support. Our daughter, he corrected quietly. Maya deserves to grow up in a world where her parents did the right thing, even when it was hard. Morrison's expression shifted slightly, not softening exactly, but recalculating. You two are actually together, not just operational cover. Started as cover, Daniel admitted. Became real somewhere along the way. Turns out fighting for survival together builds the kind of trust you can't fake. Ashford was nodding slowly. I've reviewed Ghost's reports over the past 3 months, watched the relationship develop from tactical positioning to actual partnership. It's complicated things operationally, but it also means Ms. Hart has someone with serious tactical experience protecting her interests. That's not insignificant given the enemies she's about to make. About those enemies, Brennan interjected. You're proposing reform that would expose some very powerful people to very uncomfortable questions. They won't go quietly. They'll fight back with every resource available. Legal challenges, media campaigns. And if those fail, more direct methods. Are you prepared for that level of sustained opposition? We survived last night, Evelyn said. We'll survive what comes next. Last night was reconnaissance in force, a probe to test your defenses and see what you know. What comes next will be coordinated, well-funded, and absolutely ruthless. Brennan's tone was matter-of-fact. I've seen good people destroyed by the kind of forces you're threatening. Careers ended, reputations ruined, families torn apart. You sure you want this fight? Evelyn thought about her father's legacy, the brilliant man who'd built an empire on moral compromises that eventually consumed him. Thought about Daniel's 15 years serving a system that had tried to kill him when he questioned its ethics. Thought about Maya asking when Evelyn would read to her again, innocent and trusting in a world that was neither. Yes, she said firmly, I'm sure. Morrison exchanged glances with Ashford and Brennan, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, the senator spoke. All right, here's what I can offer. Congressional cover through the Intelligence Committee. I'll position this as a voluntary reform initiative by Heart Technologies in cooperation with oversight bodies. That gives you political protection and makes it harder for your enemies to move against you openly. In exchange, you provide complete cooperation with investigators, full transparency on Sentinel's capabilities and deployments, and you accept whatever organizational changes we deem necessary to ensure proper oversight going forward. And the client list? Evelyn asked. The evidence of illegal operations? Gets used strategically. We approach the worst offenders quietly, give them a chance to cooperate and wind down their operations. Those who refuse get exposed through carefully managed leaks that don't compromise legitimate national security interests. It's not perfect justice, but it's the kind of justice that actually accomplishes something. Brennan leaned forward. I'll coordinate with DoD and other agencies to identify which Sentinel operations are legitimate and which need to be terminated. We'll need to move carefully. Some of these systems are deeply embedded in security architectures that can't be disrupted without creating vulnerabilities. But if you're genuinely offering transparency and cooperation, we can make it work. There's one more thing, Daniel said. Protection for Dr. Marsh. He broke the encryption, he knows what's in the files, and he set up a dead man's switch that releases everything if something happens to him. He needs to be under official protection, with guarantees that he won't become a convenient loose end. Agreed, Ashford said. Dr. Marsh will be placed in protective custody under my authority. His expertise will be valuable for the decryption and analysis process anyway. Consider him officially retained as a consultant. Marsh looked simultaneously relieved and terrified. Does that mean I can go home eventually? Eventually, Ashford said. After we're sure the people who tried to kill you last night have been neutralized or convinced that you're more valuable alive than dead. Give it a few weeks. A few weeks? Marsh sighed but nodded. Better than a few decades in witness protection, I suppose? Morrison checked something off screen, then looked back at the camera. I'm going to need you in Washington by tomorrow afternoon, Ms. Hart. Closed session with the Intelligence Committee. Bring documentation, bring evidence, and be prepared for some very hostile questions from members whose donors are probably on your father's client list. It won't be pleasant. I'll be there. Bring your husband, too. If half of what Colonel Ashford tells me about his background is true, his testimony about Sentinel's operational capabilities will be valuable. Plus, it'll be harder for certain people to dismiss your claims if you've got a decorated special operations veteran backing your story. Daniel's jaw tightened. I was never officially decorated. My service doesn't exist in any public records. Then it's a good thing I have access to non-public records. Morrison's smile was thin. Don't worry, Commander Park. I'm not going to expose your identity, but I'm going to use your credibility where it matters. You wanted to do the right thing. This is what the right thing looks like in Washington. It's messy and political and requires more compromise than anyone's comfortable with. Understood. Brennan spoke up again. One more thing. There's going to be immediate blowback from this call. The people we're discussing have sophisticated monitoring capabilities. They'll know something's happening even if they don't know the specific details yet. I'd recommend you stay in protective custody until the congressional testimony. After that, public exposure becomes your shield. Harder to eliminate witnesses who've already testified before Congress. We need to get Maya first, Evelyn said, looking at Daniel. She's with a neighbor in our building. I'm not leaving her exposed while we're in hiding. Phoenix can handle the extraction, Ashford said. She's good at making people disappear when necessary. Your daughter will be brought to a secure location where you can see her, and then we'll move all of you to a better facility near Washington for the duration. Daniel was already shaking his head. I go with Phoenix. Maya doesn't know her, won't trust a stranger. If you want this to go smoothly, I need to be there. That's a tactical risk, Ashford said. If they're watching your apartment, they're definitely watching our apartment, which is why we don't go in through the front door. Daniel pulled up building schematics on the laptop, pointing out details with practiced efficiency. Service entrance here, maintenance access to the apartments from internal corridors. We go in fast, grab Maya from Mrs. Chen's place, and out through the parking garage before anyone realizes we're there. 30 minutes, maybe less. Phoenix's voice came from across the room where she'd been monitoring the conversation. I can work with that, but if it goes sideways, we extract hard and don't look back. Agreed. Morrison cleared her throat, drawing attention back to the screen. While you're collecting your daughter and preparing for Washington, I'll start having conversations with people who need to know this is coming. Prepare them for the scope of what we're discussing. It'll soften the impact when you testify and reduce the likelihood of panic-driven responses. Thank you, Senator. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get worse before it gets better. The people you're threatening built their power on secrets and leverage. They're not going to surrender that power gracefully. Morrison's expression was serious. But you're doing the right thing. Your father should have done this years ago. Maybe if he had, he'd still be alive. The implication hung in the air that Raymond Hart's death hadn't been the random heart attack the official reports claimed. Evelyn had suspected as much for months, but having it confirmed by a U.S. senator made it real in a new and terrible way. "Did you know," she asked quietly, "that my father's death wasn't natural?" Morrison hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I suspected. The timing was too convenient, coming right when he was starting to have doubts about some of his clients. But I couldn't prove anything, and by the time I might have been able to investigate, you'd inherited, and the whole situation was in flux. I'm sorry. I should have pushed harder. You're pushing now. That's what matters." Evelyn felt Daniel's hand tighten around hers again, a silent offer of support. "We'll be in Washington tomorrow. Ready to testify, ready to fight, ready to finish what my father started. The right way this time." The video call ended with promises of coordination and warnings about security. When the screens went dark, Evelyn sat back in her chair and released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That went better than I expected," Dr. Marsh said from his corner. "They believed us. They believed us because the evidence is irrefutable, and because exposure would damage them almost as much as it would damage the people we're targeting," Daniel corrected. "Don't mistake pragmatic alliance for trust. We're useful right now. That can change quickly if circumstances shift." "You're very cynical for someone who just helped negotiate a deal to reform government corruption." "I'm realistic. There's a difference." Daniel stood, stretching muscles that had been still for too long. "Phoenix, how fast can we move on the extraction?" "Give me 2 hours to scout the building and confirm approach vectors. Then we go." Phoenix was already gathering gear with efficient purpose. "Ashford's sending additional support. 2 more operators to provide perimeter security while we're inside. We'll be in and out before anyone knows we're there." "Maya's going to have questions," Evelyn said quietly, "about why we're suddenly moving her, why strangers are involved, what's happening." Daniel's expression softened. "I'll explain what I can in terms she'll understand. She's used to moving quickly when I tell her it's necessary. She trusts me." "She trusts us," Evelyn corrected. "She told me last week that she was glad I married you because it meant she got a mom again. She's going to expect us to act like actual parents, not convenient partners." "Then that's what we'll be." Daniel moved to stand in front of her, his hands finding her shoulders. "I know this isn't how either of us planned this marriage to go. I know we're being forced into something real by circumstances rather than choice. But Maya deserves parents who actually care about each other, who actually want to be together. Can you do that? Can you commit to this being real, not just for the testimony or the political cover, but because it's what we actually want?" Evelyn looked up at him, seeing past the tactical operator and careful ghost to the man underneath. The father who read bedtime stories, the husband who'd stood between her and bullets, the partner who'd trusted her with truths that could destroy him. Somewhere in 3 months of careful distance and forced proximity, he'd become essential, not convenient. Essential. "Yes," she said simply. "I can commit to that. I want to commit to that." Daniel's smile was rare and genuine. "Good, because I was really hoping you'd say that." He kissed her then, not dramatically, not with the desperate intensity of people who thought they might die tomorrow, but with the steady certainty of people who decided to build something permanent. It was a promise and a commitment and an acknowledgement that whatever happened next, they were facing it together. When they broke apart, Phoenix was pointedly studying the ceiling while Dr. Marsh looked anywhere but at them. "If you're quite finished," Phoenix said dryly, "we have an extraction to plan in approximately 8 hours before people start wondering where you disappeared to." The extraction went smoothly because Daniel had planned it with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that came from 15 years of operations where mistakes meant death. They entered through the service access, moved through maintenance corridors that bypassed security cameras, and reached Mrs. Chen's apartment without encountering resistance. Maya was watching cartoons when they arrived, safe and oblivious to the danger that had been circling around her. When she saw Daniel, she launched herself at him with the enthusiasm of a 6-year-old who hadn't seen her father in nearly 24 hours. "Daddy, where were you? Mrs. Chen said you had work, but you're never gone this long and I was getting worried and—" She stopped mid-sentence as she noticed Evelyn behind him. "Evelyn, did you and Daddy have an adventure without me?" "Something like that," Evelyn said, kneeling to Maya's level. "We need to go on another adventure now. Somewhere safe where we can all be together. Does that sound okay?" Maya's eyes lit up. "Like a vacation? Can we go to the beach?" "I've never been to the beach." "Not quite a beach. More like a secure facility in Virginia. But there will be time for beaches later, I promise." Daniel was already gathering Maya's essentials. Her favorite stuffed animal, the book they'd been reading, clothes for a few days. "But right now, we need to move quickly. Can you be brave and quiet like we practiced?" Maya nodded seriously, understanding that when her father used that tone, arguing wasn't an option. "I can be so quiet, you won't even know I'm there." "That's my girl." They moved back through the corridors, Phoenix on point and Daniel carrying Maya with Evelyn close behind. The parking garage extraction point was clear, the vehicle waiting with engine running. They were loading in when Evelyn heard the sound, a car door opening somewhere in the garage's shadows, footsteps approaching with purposeful intent. "Contact," Phoenix said quietly, her weapon already tracking the source. "Don't engage unless fired upon." A figure emerged from between parked cars, Thomas Whitmore, looking significantly less polished than usual. His suit was rumpled, his expression desperate. "Evelyn?" "Thank God. I've been looking for you everywhere. We need to talk." Daniel shifted position, putting himself between Whitmore and Maya. "This isn't the time, Thomas." "There's no more time. Don't you understand? They know you have the files. They know you're planning to expose everything. And they've decided that if they can't stop you quietly, they'll do it loudly and blame it on corporate rivalry gone wrong." Thomas took a step closer, his hands raised in what might have been surrender or appeal. "I tried to warn you, tried to get you to back away from investigating your father's projects, but you wouldn't listen. And now you're here making dramatic speeches in parking garages," Evelyn finished coldly. "What do you want, Thomas?" "I want you to understand that I was trying to protect you. Your father, he brought me into the client network years ago, made me part of the distribution system for Sentinel access. I didn't want to be involved, but the money was too good, and the threats were too real if I refused. And now they're going to kill everyone who knows too much, and that includes me unless I give them something valuable enough to buy my way out." The implication was clear. Thomas was offering to trade information for protection, to become a cooperating witness in exchange for immunity. It was the kind of pragmatic betrayal Evelyn would have expected from a board member who'd spent 30 years valuing profit over principle. "What information?" she asked. "The inner circle, the people at the top of the client list who actually control Sentinel's deployment. Names you won't find in any files because they're smart enough to work through cutouts and intermediaries. But I know them, met with them, can identify them, and prove their involvement." Thomas's voice was urgent. "That's worth something, isn't it? Worth protection?" Phoenix exchanged glances with Daniel, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Daniel said, "Get in the car. You're coming with us. We'll figure out if you're lying once we're somewhere secure." Thomas looked surprised but relieved. He climbed into the vehicle, careful not to make any sudden movements around operators who clearly knew how to kill quickly and efficiently. The drive to the new safe house was tense and silent, except for Maya's questions about where they were going and why Mr. Whitmore looked so scared. "Mr. Whitmore made some mistakes," Evelyn said carefully. "Now he's trying to fix them. That takes courage." "Or cowardice masquerading as courage," Daniel muttered under his breath. But he didn't contradict her in front of Maya. The new safe house was larger and better equipped, with separate rooms for Maya and spaces where interrogations could be conducted away from civilian ears. Thomas was placed in secure holding while Ashford was briefed on his sudden appearance. Maya was settled with toys and entertainment, carefully insulated from the adult conversations happening in other parts of the building. "Do you trust him?" Evelyn asked Daniel as they watched Thomas through one-way glass, the older man pacing nervously in his temporary quarters. "Not even a little bit. But that doesn't mean he's not useful." Daniel's arms were crossed, his posture radiating skepticism. He's a survivor, always has been. If giving us names keeps him alive, he'll give us names. Whether those names are accurate or complete is another question. Ashford will vet everything he tells us, cross-reference it with what we already know from Ghost Protocol files. If he's lying, we'll know. And if he's telling the truth, we have leverage against people who've stayed hidden for decades. That could be the difference between reform actually working and getting buried by forces we can't fight. Daniel turned from the window to look at her directly. Are you ready for Washington? For testifying before Congress and making yourself the public face of this reform movement? I don't have much choice. If I don't step up, who will? You? You're supposed to be invisible, remember? Not anymore. Morrison's going to use my testimony. That means my identity becomes at least semi-public. My service record, my involvement with Sentinel, my reason for going into hiding. His expression was grim. I spent 15 years being a ghost. That's over now. I'm going to be exposed, scrutinized, investigated. People will dig into my past and find things I wish could stay buried. Evelyn moved closer, her hand finding his. Then we face it together. Your past, my father's legacy, whatever comes out during the testimony. We don't hide anymore. We stand in the light and let people see who we actually are. That's either very brave or very foolish. With us, it's usually both. Maya's voice called from the other room, asking if they could read her book before bedtime. It was barely evening, far too early for sleep, but the disruption to her routine had clearly unsettled her. Daniel went to handle it, while Evelyn stayed to watch Thomas Whitmore pace and worry and calculate his chances of survival. The next 36 hours blurred together in a cascade of preparation and revelation. Thomas provided names that checked out against Ghost Protocol files, adding context and connections that painted a picture of a network far larger than anyone had realized. Ashford coordinated with Morrison and Brennan to prepare testimony and gather additional evidence. Phoenix and her team maintained security, while additional operators arrived to provide coverage for the Washington trip. And through it all, Evelyn, Daniel, and Maya existed in a strange bubble of forced domesticity. Reading books and having meals and pretending that armed guards outside the door were perfectly normal. Maya adapted with the resilience of children, asking fewer questions as she understood that her parents couldn't answer most of them. She seemed content with the knowledge that they were together, that they were safe for now, and that somehow this adventure would end with them back home. The congressional testimony was scheduled for a closed session on Wednesday afternoon. They flew to Washington on a military transport, Maya delighted by the plane and oblivious to the armed escort that accompanied them. The facility where they were housed near Capitol Hill was more secure than any hotel, with guards who didn't pretend to be anything other than what they were. On Wednesday morning, Evelyn stood in front of a mirror in clothes that cost more than most people earned in a month and tried to recognize herself. She looked like a CEO about to testify before Congress. She felt like an imposter who'd stumbled into a role she wasn't qualified to play. "You look perfect," Daniel said from the doorway. He wore a dark suit that made him look less like a janitor and more like what he actually was, a professional who'd operated at the highest levels of classified operations. Confident, competent, exactly like someone who can handle whatever questions they throw at you. "I'm terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's when you stop being afraid that you make mistakes." He crossed to her, adjusting her collar with the same careful precision he applied to everything. "They're going to try to discredit you, suggest you're motivated by profit or political ambition or revenge against your father's legacy. Don't let them bait you into emotional responses. Stick to facts. Stick to evidence. And remember that Morrison is on our side, even when she has to play tough for appearances. What if I mess this up? What if I say something wrong and destroy our credibility? Then I step in and cover for you. That's what partners do." Daniel kissed her forehead gently. "You're not doing this alone, Evelyn. You never have to do this alone again." The congressional hearing room was smaller than Evelyn had imagined, with aged wood paneling and the kind of formal atmosphere that made every word feel weighted with significance. The Intelligence Committee members sat in a semicircle, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Senator Morrison presided from the center, her face carefully neutral. "Ms. Hart, Commander Park. Thank you for agreeing to testify before this committee in closed session. Morrison's voice carried authority that silenced the low conversations around the room. We're here today to discuss allegations regarding Hart Technology's role in developing and distributing classified surveillance systems without proper oversight. Ms. Hart, you've provided documentation that suggests widespread corruption and illegal activity connected to Project Sentinel. Can you summarize those allegations for the committee? Evelyn took a breath and began. She laid out the evidence methodically: her father's involvement in building autonomous surveillance systems, the client list that included foreign powers and domestic actors, the complete lack of congressional oversight, the deaths of people who'd asked questions. She presented Ghost Protocol files, walked through financial transactions, and explained how the technology worked and why it was dangerous in unregulated hands. The questioning that followed was brutal. Senators whose campaigns had been funded by Hart Technology's executives grilled her about motives and accuracy. They suggested she was a disgruntled daughter trying to destroy her father's legacy. They questioned whether the evidence was fabricated or misinterpreted. Daniel's testimony was different, but equally intense. He spoke about his involvement with Sentinel's development, about operations he'd witnessed or participated in that used the technology for purposes that crossed legal and ethical lines. His military bearing and obvious expertise made him harder to dismiss than Evelyn, but they tried anyway, suggesting he was a disgraced operator with a grudge, someone whose clearances had been revoked for cause. It was Thomas Whitmore's testimony that finally shifted the room's atmosphere. The board member who'd spent decades enabling Raymond Hart's worst decisions laid out names and operations with the precise recall of someone who'd been taking notes in case he ever needed leverage. He identified senators who'd taken bribes, Pentagon officials who'd looked the other way, intelligence operatives who'd used Sentinel for personal vendettas rather than national security. The accusations hung in the air like grenades waiting to detonate. Several senators looked genuinely shocked. Others looked terrified that their own names might be on lists they hadn't seen yet. The careful facade of congressional dignity fractured as the scope of the corruption became undeniable. Morrison let the silence stretch before speaking. This committee will obviously need time to review all the evidence presented today, but based on preliminary examination, it appears that Ms. Hart's allegations have substantial merit. I'm recommending immediate investigation into all individuals and organizations named in the Ghost Protocol files, with a focus on determining which operations were properly authorized and which represent criminal activity that requires prosecution. With respect, Madam Chair, one of the more hostile senators interrupted. We're talking about exposing intelligence operations that are currently active and potentially compromising relationships with allied nations. The damage has already been done. Morrison cut him off sharply. What we're discussing now is how to mitigate that damage through managed reform, rather than letting it explode into public scandal that destroys the intelligence community's credibility entirely. Ms. Hart and Commander Park have offered us that option. I suggest we take it before someone less interested in reform decides to take this story to the Washington Post. The threat was clear and effective. After another hour of questioning and debate, the committee voted to accept the reform proposal with oversight provisions even stricter than what Evelyn had originally suggested. Hart Technologies would be restructured under independent review. Project Sentinel would be systematically dismantled with components either brought into proper oversight or destroyed entirely. The client list would be used to negotiate shutdowns and recoveries rather than triggering immediate prosecutions, but those who refused cooperation would face full exposure. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the clean justice Evelyn had wanted when this started, but it was real progress toward something better than what her father had built. When they emerged from the hearing room 6 hours after entering, Evelyn felt like she'd been through combat. Daniel looked equally exhausted but satisfied in a way she hadn't seen before, like he'd finally finished a mission he'd been carrying for years. "We did it," she said quietly as they walked toward the secured transport that would take them back to their facility. "We did it," Daniel agreed. "Now comes the hard part." That was the hard part. That was the opening move. The hard part is actually implementing reform while dealing with pushback from everyone who benefits from the current system. He helped her into the vehicle, his hand lingering on hers. But we have momentum now. Public testimony before Congress, even in closed session, creates a record that's hard to bury, and Morrison's backing gives us political cover to make real changes. Back at the facility, Maya was waiting with a drawing she'd made. Her family, as she saw it. Daniel and Evelyn holding hands with Maya in the middle, all of them smiling under a bright sun. It was the kind of simple, innocent art that 6-year-olds created without understanding how much it revealed about what they needed. "Do you like it?" Maya asked eagerly. "Mrs. Chen, the new Mrs. Chen, not our neighbor, said I should draw something happy because you've been doing hard grown-up work." "It's perfect," Evelyn said, kneeling to hug the little girl. "Absolutely perfect." That night, after Maya was asleep and the security teams had completed their rotations, Evelyn and Daniel sat on the facility's small balcony and watched Washington's lights spread beneath them. The city looked peaceful from this distance, hiding the power struggles and compromises and desperate deals that defined it. "When this is over," Daniel said quietly, "when the reform is implemented and the investigations are complete and we can go back to something resembling normal life, what do you want?" Evelyn thought about the question. 3 months ago, she would have said she wanted her company, her independence, her carefully controlled existence that didn't require vulnerability or trust. Now those things felt insufficient, almost hollow. "I want Maya to have a normal childhood. I want to build a company that does actual good in the world instead of just making profits. And I want this," she gestured between them, "to be real. Not because circumstances forced it, but because we chose it. Because we actually love each other and want to build something permanent together." Daniel's smile was visible even in the darkness. "I can work with that. Though the normal childhood might be challenging given that her father is a former ghost operator and her mother is about to become the face of defense industry reform. She's resilient. She'll adapt. Like her parents." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd started as strangers making a convenient arrangement and had become partners through shared danger and hard truths. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be investigations and hearings, legal battles and media scrutiny, attempts to undermine the reform or neutralize the threats to powerful interests. But they would face it together, with the kind of trust that only formed when people stopped hiding from each other. 6 months later, Hart Technologies was nearly unrecognizable. The board had been restructured, with several members resigning under pressure and being replaced by appointees acceptable to the Congressional Oversight Committee. Project Sentinel had been systematically dismantled, with legitimate components brought into the light and illegal operations shut down through carefully managed negotiations that avoided public scandal. Some of the names on the Ghost Protocol client list had cooperated, accepting quiet retirement or transfer to positions where they couldn't do further damage. Others had fought back with legal challenges and media campaigns that ultimately failed when evidence proved overwhelming. A few had disappeared entirely, fleeing to countries without extradition treaties and confirming their guilt more effectively than any trial could have. Thomas Whitmore was in witness protection somewhere distant, his testimony having bought him immunity from prosecution, but not from the enemies he'd made by talking. Dr. Marsh had returned to academic life at a university far from Manhattan, his brief adventure in classified encryption becoming a story he could never tell but would never forget. And in a penthouse apartment that had been thoroughly swept for surveillance devices and rebuilt with security measures that would have impressed paranoid dictators, Evelyn and Daniel were building the life they'd accidentally discovered they wanted. "Again!" Maya demanded, bouncing on the couch with the inexhaustible energy of a 7-year-old who'd just had her birthday. "Do the voice again!" Daniel groaned dramatically, but complied, reading from the fantasy novel Maya had received as a gift, and performing character voices that made her dissolve into giggles. Evelyn watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand, and felt something she hadn't expected to feel 3 months ago. Contentment. Her phone buzzed with alerts from Hart Technologies. Production numbers from the Sao Paulo facility, now operating transparently and profitably without the shadow operations that had compromised it. Contract renewals from Pentagon clients who'd survived the investigation and were cautiously optimistic about the new company direction. A message from Senator Morrison about upcoming testimony regarding expansion of oversight frameworks to other defense contractors. The work was never finished. There would always be another battle to fight, another compromise to negotiate, another threat to counter. But for now, in this moment, Evelyn had something her father never found, a balance between ambition and ethics, between success and integrity. Your turn, Daniel said, handing her the book as Maya crawled into her lap. Chapter 7. The Dragon Negotiations. I'm terrible at dragon voices. You're the CEO of a defense contractor. You negotiate with Pentagon generals. Dragons are basically the same thing with scales. Evelyn laughed and started reading, Maya snuggling against her with complete trust. This was what real looked like. Not the careful distance of their first 3 months, not the operational partnership forged in crisis, but the messy, complicated, genuine family they'd built from a marriage that started as convenience and became choice. Outside, Manhattan glittered in the evening light. Somewhere in the city, Phoenix and her team maintained surveillance on threats that still circled but hadn't found openings to exploit. Somewhere in Washington, investigators were following leads from ghost protocol files to people who thought they'd never face consequences. Somewhere around the world, autonomous surveillance systems were being shut down, their dangerous capabilities destroyed or brought into proper oversight. The game continued. But the players had changed, and for the first time in years, the people trying to do the right thing had the power to actually accomplish something. Daniel joined them on the couch, his arm around Evelyn's shoulders, as she read about dragons and negotiations and heroes who won through cleverness rather than violence. Maya's eyes were already drooping, exhausted by birthday excitement and sugar consumption that exceeded recommended limits. "Love you," Maya mumbled sleepily. "Love you both." "Love you too, Bug," Daniel said softly. "Love you," Evelyn echoed, meaning it completely. When Maya finally fell asleep, they carried her to bed. A true bed in the actual bedroom, not the guest wing they'd maintained for show. The apartment had been reorganized months ago, the careful separation of spaces abandoned in favor of actual cohabitation. It was one bedroom they shared, one kitchen they cooked in together, one life they were building piece by piece. Later, as they prepared for sleep themselves, Evelyn looked at Daniel and asked the question that had been forming for weeks. "Do you ever miss it? The operations, the adrenaline, being Ghost instead of being Daniel Park, husband and father?" Daniel considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. Usually at 3 in the morning when I can't sleep and my brain runs through tactical scenarios for threats that don't exist anymore. But then I remember what that life cost me. Friends, relationships, any sense of stability or normalcy. And I look at what I have now, you, Maya, a chance to build something that lasts, and I know I made the right choice. Even though the choice was kind of forced by circumstances. The best choices usually are. We think we're in control, planning our lives according to some careful strategy, but really, we're just responding to circumstances and hoping we respond well." He pulled her closer. "I responded by marrying a CEO who turned out to be brilliant and stubborn and exactly the kind of partner I needed without knowing I needed one. I'd say that worked out pretty well." Evelyn smiled against his shoulder. "I responded by proposing marriage to a janitor who turned out to be a legendary special operations commander with a complicated past and a talent for protecting people he cares about. Also worked out well. We're very fortunate that our impulsive decisions happen to align with good outcomes. Or very good at adapting to circumstances and making the best of them. That too." They fell asleep tangled together in a bed that no longer felt temporary, in an apartment that had become home, in a life that had started as desperate convenience and become something neither of them wanted to lose. The storm had broken and passed. The enemies were defeated or neutralized. The company was reformed. The family was real. And somewhere in the middle of fighting for justice and surviving attempts to silence them, two people who'd married for all the wrong reasons had discovered all the right ones. The arrangement was over. The partnership remained. And the future, for the first time in either of their lives, looked bright enough to believe in.